possibility and the ability for fires to become active or new fire starts is high probability.
The Palisades fire to the west of Los Angeles is now 14% contained. The Eaton fire in the Pasadena-Altadena area is about a third contained. California authorities say at least 24 people have died in the wildfires. Most of the deaths in the Los Angeles County blazes have come in the Eaton fire. Elise Hugh reports on 2 victims who perished in Altadena.
Both family members who died in the Eaton fire faced disabilities. Anthony Mitchell Sr. was a 67-year-old amputee. His son, Justin Mitchell, who also died in the fire, had cerebral palsy. The family says the pair were waiting to be evacuated as flames reached their neighborhood. Hajim White is Anthony Mitchell's daughter.
I just lost it. I started screaming, hollering at my husband. He was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I said, "My dad and brothers go."
Crews have begun search and recovery operations using cadaver dogs to locate any additional victims. For NPR News, I'm Elise Hugh in Los Angeles.
The Senate starts confirmation hearings this week for nominees to President-elect Trump's cabinet. Trump's choices to lead the Justice Department, Defense Department, CIA, and the State Department are among the first to appear before Senate committees. NPR's Luke Garrett has more.
On Tuesday, Pete Hegseth, Trump's choice for defense secretary, will take questions from the Senate Armed Services Committee. Hegseth, a former Fox News host and combat veteran, has been meeting with senators for weeks as he faces allegations of excessive drinking and sexual misconduct. Despite this, Republican Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas tells Fox News that all of Trump's picks, including Hegseth, will get confirmed.
Yes, some of them are outside the box, but I do think we have the votes.
On Wednesday, Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi, Secretary of State nominee Marco Rubio, and CIA Director nominee John Radcliffe all face Senate committee hearings. Once the committees advance the nominees, the full Senate will then vote on each candidate, who need a simple majority for confirmation. Luke Garrett, NPR News, Washington.
President Biden is scheduled to deliver a major foreign policy speech this afternoon at the State Department. He's expected to discuss the work he's done to strengthen U.S. ties with its allies and boost U.S. leadership around the world. On Wall Street, the Dow is up 151 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Declawing cats is now illegal here in Massachusetts after Governor Maura Healey signed a bill into law late last week. Here's GBH's Tori Bedford.
The law bans the practice of declawing except in cases where it's deemed medically necessary. Allie Blank with the Animal Rescue League of Boston says people declaw to deal with cat scratching, but it often makes issues like aggression much worse.
In places that have instituted a ban on declawing, they've actually seen a decrease in the number of cat surrenders to shelters because they're not seeing as many of these behavioral problems.
Violators of the new law could be fined $1,000 for a first offense, $1,500 for a second offense, and $2,500 for a third or subsequent offense. The ban goes into effect in April. Tori Bedford, GBH News, 89.7.
The Commonwealth Beacon reports that Boston City Councilor Ed Flynn is not running for mayor of Boston. The Herald, meanwhile, says the fact that Flynn is not running leaves a big opening for New England Patriots Foundation President Josh Kraft to throw his hat into the race against Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. Wu, by the way, has said that she is running but has yet to hold a formal campaign launch or a formal announcement. In sports, tonight's NFC wildcard playoff game, it's Minnesota at the LA Rams. In the forecast, mostly sunny, low 40s today, clear and mid-20s overnight, mostly sunny, low 30s tomorrow, sunny and upper 20s on Wednesday. 36 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Luminescence Foundation, dedicated to shedding light on neurological research focused on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases and supporting land conservation initiatives, and the listeners who support this NPR station.
Houston Brady, I am Marjorie Yeek, and you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We have broadcasting, streaming actually, at youtube.com/GBH News, live from the GBH studio. We're going to be at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. The Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell, is going to be with us from 1 to 2, taking our questions and yours. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Excellent, thank you.
So the death toll in Los Angeles is up to 24 people. Tens of thousands are under evacuation orders. And the scope of destruction, as I'm sure you've all been watching, of homes and cultural landmarks and small businesses is massive as fires close in on LA from nearly all directions. Santa Ana winds are to blame for the unpredictability and rapid spread of the fires, while climate change-related conditions like extreme drought, sandwiched between very, very wet seasons, contribute to the destruction. We have a bunch of issues we'd like your reactions to. Most of the news, at least as much as Marjorie and I have been able to observe it, are downplaying, if mentioning at all, climate change. What's your reaction to that? A bunch of people I know are calling this a West Coast problem, ignoring that we've had drought conditions here in Massachusetts, changing our fire season already, waters rising, Cape Cod, Plum Island. Are you worried about what's going to happen here? Should they be allowed to rebuild out there? There's a big and a fierce debate about whether or not insurance companies should pay for it, whether the government should buy their land so that they have a head start to go somewhere else like they did in San Antonio a few years ago. And finally, we would love to hear from Trump supporters about the comments made by people like Elon Musk, Vice President-elect Vance, and Donald Trump spreading misinformation, phony information, mostly about DEI, blaming DEI, women firefighters, that sort of thing, for all this, caring obviously much more about scoring political points than helping the people of California. Again, we'd love to hear from Trump voters, and what's your reaction to that? The number's 877-301-8970. You know, this rebuilding issue is the exact same one you and I discussed in the air, and I'm sure our listeners are too, around Cape, Plum Island, particularly places that have ended up with great erosion, if not in the water itself, time and again. And I wasn't aware of the fact, after some hurricane a few years ago, either the state of Texas or the city of San Antonio bought the land so that people had a head start. And while the fear of the government officials was that the landowners would be resistant, apparently overwhelmingly they were thrilled to be able to move and have essentially a little stash to be able to invest in a new location. But I know that's not what's driving you the most. What's driving you nuts is how climate change is barely mentioned in these stories.
I sat through an entire 60 Minutes presentation about this last night, which was excellent. I don't think I'm mistaken, Jim. The words climate change were never used. Then I watched it again at 8 o'clock, the entire hour of Anderson Cooper's special
That was great, by
on
the way.
CNN. You said you heard the words climate change.
No, I didn't say that.
I
didn't say it.
I heard warming climate at the end. But, you know, there's something, maybe we just don't want to face this, like we don't want to face other horrible things. But we're blaming Karen Bass for being out of town. We're blaming.
Well, we should,
you know,
I think.
That's fine. You can blame her if you want. You can blame, you know, not enough water there in the fire hydrants. That turned out to be bogus because the magnitude of this just overwhelmed hydrants there and overwhelmed fire trucks. You know, you think about it. When you have a fire, I'm sure you've had fires on your street in Cambridge. Sure. We had a big fire. I think it was an 8-alarm fire up the street from me a few years ago, and I remember waking up with the darkness and the smoke. And this was like 3 doors up from me. There must have been 5 fire trucks there. That's one building. I mean, there was no way that the fire, there was enough fire trucks, never mind enough firefighters, and obviously enough water. But they hardly mentioned it. So it's
anticipatory obedience by the media?
Well, I don't think we...
They don't upset Donald Trump?
I think it was long before Donald Trump. We don't mention this. So my point is that we can blame everything. The hydrants, we can blame this, we can blame that. We blame everything except this is what we've done to ourselves, and we're not doing anything about it. Last year was the hottest year on record in the entire planet. The year before that was the second hottest year. You know, we've all had these hot years in the last 10 years. And what's clear here is what happened, as you said. It was the vegetation.
Couple of wet seasons with
allowing the vegetation to be lush and full and then to dry up. And then a combination of really ferocious Santa Ana winds. So anyway, it's like we don't want to believe this happens.
I think it's, you know what it is? It's sort of like CNN has all of these extreme Trumpers on now in an attempt to, I guess, to appease their audience. Maybe it's the same situation here. There's half the population obviously doesn't care about climate change or doesn't believe in it, as evidenced by Trump's victory. So maybe they're trying to appease them. The number's 877-301-8970. Also, how low rent. There's a great video. If people haven't seen it yet, it's on Twitter. Tweeted out by Governor Newsom, I'm sure other people too, of Musk, who's been critical of everything, talking to some leader in the firefighting effort in California, ready to go after him. And the guy says, okay, so it takes like 1,000 gallons to put out a fire in one house. there are 12,000, he doesn't use this number, but 12,000 structures that were on fire. Where are we going to find 12,000 versus 1,000 gallons of water to do this? And Trump keeps going, must keep going, because he has nothing to say. But this DEI thing, we're going to talk to Khalil Gibran Muhammad about the anti-DEI winds blowing into the university world. But the notion that this is all to blame because they spent money on DEI and not on fire equipment, women firefighters.
The chief of the LA Fire Department, she's a gay woman. So that means that it's her
fault. Well, that's
fault.
why the fire happened, obviously. 877-301-8970. And by the way, if you just want to give us your reaction, which we're all experiencing just watching this video on the nightly news of the horrors of what are happening and seeing people suffering pain. When people describe, I mentioned this the other day, when people describe the loss of some of the most, not their house, but rather some individual thing from their mother or their child or the whatever that meant everything to them.
You look at these pictures, everything, your children's schools are gone. Your children's doctor's offices are gone. We saw stories of vets shoving 15 dogs in their cars and getting other people to help them get the animals out of the shelters. The shopping malls are gone. They had a picture of the Starbucks. It looked like it was really in pretty good shape because it looked like it was a stone sort of
structure.
Yes, gone. Your local everything in your neighborhood is gone. You look at Pacific Palisades, just from the air, it's just like one big ash field, and that other neighborhood where a lot of people have lived for generations and generations is gone. So it's a weird thing when you think about buying a house, and we're going to talk later with Catherine Gerger Barnett about mental health in young people. You know, you think about, I know when we bought our first house, I thought, well, this is where I'm going to be for a while. You know, maybe not my whole life, but it's where I'm going to be for a while. The sense of that kind of permanence, I think, is gone because Asheville, North Carolina, was supposed to be impervious to the climate crisis, right? Well, look what happened in Asheville, North Carolina. Look what happened to Montpelier, Vermont. And one last thing, and then I'll shut
floods.
up.
And by the way, when Marjorie mentions Gergen Burnett and mental health with young people, it's around climate issues.
Yes,
that
around
they're
climate
so
issues.
troubled.
We were talking about places that you don't think it's going to happen. Well,
How about here?
Malibu.
Oh,
If you thought there was going to be a problem in Malibu, you would think it was the ocean.
The ocean's right.
The Pacific Ocean that was going to do them in. No, you see all these burnt-out structures sitting on the sand on the beach at Malibu, and it was the fire that took them.
877-301-8970. So your reaction to any of this, any of the issues that we broached or ones that are consuming you as you watch this horror show on the West Coast. Let's start in Rentham with Mary. Mary, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, guys. Listen, I was on a few weeks ago when you asked about how do people feel about the new administration coming in.
Yeah.
And I said, things have to get really, really, really bad for people to open their eyes. Well, you know, Massachusetts had a fire risk. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And it could happen again. We are not immune just because we're on this coast.
I agree
does
with
not mean we can't get the same kind of thing happening here. Climate change is real. That's all I have to say. Guys, have a great day.
Thank you. You said things have to get really horrible, and they obviously are beyond really horrible on the West Coast, but I guess Mary's point is we delude ourselves into thinking, as you were mentioning a minute ago, that's over there. That doesn't happen here. But, you know, was it the Fitchburg-Leominster area, plus Vermont, plus the Cape, plus Plum Island? I mean, all of these natural disasters, obviously not quite of the magnitude of what we're seeing in Los Angeles County, but serious problems nevertheless.
Well, you know, it's a weird thing. There are certain things, and I don't want to make too much of this, but child abuse is something that we just don't want to admit it happens. Joe couldn't have done that. Susie couldn't have done that. Didn't believe the Catholic Church, didn't believe all these coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it turned out to be 95% of it was absolutely true. We don't want to admit that. And there's something going on with climate change, the same sort of thing. I think it's beyond politics. It's not just the climate change deniers. It's people being so horrified by the prospect. They
of what it might mean for them, you mean?
Everything else except what?
Because they don't know how to deal with it.
Because they don't know how to deal with it. And I'm so happy we're having Bill McKibben on later in the week, because I remember talking to him about this before, our inability to face this because it's such an existential threat. And one of the things I learned from him is that if we stopped everything today, no more cars with fossil fuel, no more nothing today, things would still get worse for the next 30 years before they get better. that's pretty scary to think about.
877-301-8970. We're getting your reaction to a whole host of issues flowing from the HAR in Los Angeles County. Phyllis in a car. Hi.
Good morning.
Hi.
Long-time listener. Love you guys. Love you.
Thank you for calling.
Okay, so I saw something. I don't know what news outlet it was, but a reporter asked a firefighter, what really happened here? There was no water. There wasn't enough water. He said, listen, when I'm battling a fire and the wind is 10 miles an hour, I'm a firefighter.
Oh, yeah.
When the wind is 30 miles an hour, I'm an observer. There wasn't enough water anywhere to extinguish the situation.
Well, it's not just water. Wait. When you mentioned the wind a minute ago, the first day or so, they couldn't get helicopters and these planes up in the air because the winds were approaching 100 miles an hour. So everything was being fought on the ground. And as all the experts said, you can't win this in a ground war when it's as immense as it is and there's no air support,
Exactly. All this blame is just blame.
Well, Phyllis, can I say one more thing, though? Even if the blame had merit, is this the time to be doing this? Shouldn't Donald Trump be doing, and Vance and Musk doing everything they can to support the people in California who are scared and suffering in any way they can, rather than creating doubt? Even if this had merit, as I say, there's a time for that. When the fires are out, Newsom himself has called for an investigation. That's a time to probe whether or not there were issues that could have been addressed that were not. Phyllis, we're glad you called. Call us again soon. Thanks. 877-301-8970.
A lot of people are talking about there not being enough firefighters, they're not having spent enough money on the budget. That was another bit of misinformation. Apparently, the budget went up significantly.
No, it didn't.
2020, I think it did.
No, it was cut 2%.
25.
Oh, I thought it was cut 2%.
Well, then we're
I thought she cut 17. Can someone check that? I thought Bass cut 17.9 million, but it was only 2% of an $800 million budget. But I could be wrong.
I think that's incorrect. But even if it is correct,
yeah.
The idea that if there were just more firefighters there, or more firefighter trucks, or more water, would that have made a difference? Yeah, but not enough to stop it. I mean, I think that's the thing. And as everybody has pointed out too, the winds were really, really unusually high, reaching 100 miles an hour in some places, and that's unusually high for the Santa Ana winds. But that's one of the things that you see, extremes in climate, right? The extreme rainfall from the year before and the extreme drought this year. Michael in Watertown, thank you for calling.
Hi, Michael.
Hello.
Hi.
The 25 or 30 years ago, I had read an article, which I have tried to locate again, but I cannot. But basically, when they first started trying to address climate change, it was an article that said the Republicans will not acknowledge climate change until it starts to cause the insurance companies to go bankrupt. And we are now at that point. And it's a shame that it took this many years. And I don't know if somebody can do web searches better than I can. But I'd love to see that article brought back out and to the forefront of saying, like, this isn't something we weren't anticipating.
Well, Michael, that's a great point, because we've seen this in Florida where people can't get insurance in Florida. So the state steps in and gives you some insurance, but it's not enough to cover your loss. State Farm pulled out of California. I think it's back in again now.
I think you're right, yeah.
But I think, what are they talking about, $50 billion worth of damage? I think you're going to see these insurers, that's kind of the joke. It's not going to be our recognition of climate change. It's going to be capitalism, that the insurance companies won't insure people anymore, that may bring about a change. But
Michael, I'm not sure this is what you're talking about, but a relevant thing nevertheless, which I think came out around that time. Los Angeles Times did a series. Bill McKibben alerted us to this, speaking of Bill, in which it was sort of like the cigarette companies internally, the fossil fuel companies knew what was coming with incredible precision. Yeah. And they hit it, just like the cigarette companies did. Again, I don't know if that was the one that spoke about the GOP is going to resist this until the last possible moment. And by the way, they continue to resist it because I'm assuming you're aware there's a guy who hasn't budged on the issue who's about to be sworn in 7 days. So, Michael, thank you for the call.
I'm hoping this makes it harder, because all sorts of people have watched this, and it makes you a little scared. I'm hoping this
Well,
is
not only
gonna-
that, in terms of a changing policies, we're going to discuss this with Elon Stavins at noon. Mexico is sending firefighters. Undocumented workers are helping to put out fires as volunteers in their community. And there was a great piece either in the Washington Post or the New York Times the other day about how undocumented workers are going to be doing most of the rebuilding. Is that going to have any impact on, quote, mass deportation on day one? I would assume the answer is no.
877-301-8970. We're talking about your reaction to the fires out in California, which are still raging in some parts of the state. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 from Studio 3 in Brighton. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The Strait of Gibraltar is just 9 miles wide at its narrowest point. It separates Morocco and Spain, and each year, hundreds of migrants perish trying to swim across.
It's the most lamentable way to die, he says, out there in the silence, in absolute anonymity.
Next week, our series on migration from Africa to Europe, On the World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Lyric Stage, presenting Crumbs from the Table of Joy. Set in 1950s Brooklyn, two sisters mourn the loss of their mother with Hollywood films, daydreams, and lots of cookies. January 10th through February 2nd at Lyric Stage Boston. Tickets at lyricstage.com. And McLean Middleton, a regional law firm with over 100 attorneys and locations in Woburn and Boston. Serving clients for over 100 years in the areas of corporate law, tax law, litigation, and estate planning. McLean.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live from the GBH Studio 3 and streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Rafer went to the break and the camera was on you. You know who was sitting on your left shoulder? John Parker's head.
Oh.
It was great. It's really pretty great, I should say. In any case, we're live at the library tomorrow for Ask the AG from 1 to 2 with Andrea Campbell. Ton of stuff for her. Our text prompt of the day at 877-301-8970. I assume is inspired by my fortitude in keeping up my New Year's resolutions for 2 whole weeks. Here's the question. January 10th, that was Friday, was officially Quitter's Day, as they call it. We're now 2 weeks into the new year. How are you sticking with your resolutions? Or have you joined the millions who've already thrown in the towel? 877-301-8970. And we'll read some of those right for the 1 o'clock news. Right now, though, we're talking about a whole variety of issues relating to the raging fires in Los Angeles that could get worse as the winds pick up in the next 24 hours. Talking about the climate issue mostly being ignored, the rebuilding issue, the misinformation crusade by Musk, Vance, and Trump, and whether you're worried out here on the East Coast. By the way, the term, for whatever it's worth, which I'd never heard before, I don't know if you have, Marjorie, the climate term, hydroclimate whiplash.
Yep.
And that was the thing, again, 2 wet seasons, and right in between is this bone-dry, abnormally hot season.
Yes.
And that's what contributed to the
And then
ferocity of these fires.
They also talk about this climate overlap where
What does that mean?
that the ground and the vegetation was incredibly dry.
Oh, I see.
And
I
the
see.
winds were incredibly fierce. So there was an overlap of 2 things happening together. And by the way, Elon Musk, as we know, has the president's ear. And how many followers does he have? Millions?
Only 200 million on Twitter.
Yeah, okay, on Twitter. So Alex Jones apparently went on this rant, and Alex Jones, people may recall, said that the children that were murdered in Sandy Hook were crisis actors, and he was sued by their families, and his company was pretty much shut down. Is there anything left of his company?
Well, I'm not sure what the status is actually, but he lost big time.
He lost big time in a court of law. Anyway, he went on this rant to say that this whole fire was part of a larger globalist plot to cause the collapse of the United States, to which Elon Musk, the man who has the ear of the president, replied, quote unquote, true.
Great. It's good. 877-301-8970 is the number there. Erin, you're in Cambridge. You're on Boston Public Radio. We appreciate your call. Hi.
Hi, how you doing today?
Well.
So I live in Inman Square, just like you.
Oh, great.
And I also own a house on Plum Island.
Oh, gosh.
My family's been up there since the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's about 4 or 5 of us that have houses up there. And honestly, it is so beautiful up there. And side note, I did read Julia Kayam's newest book, too.
Oh, great.
She goes into Plum Island, too. Super fangirl, by the way.
She's great.
She really is. So, I mean, I look at it this way. I live in densely packed Inman, right where all the restaurants are.
Mm-hmm.
My house could go up on fire any day. I could get hit by a car.
Mm-hmm.
And for the beauty and the just lovely, just amazing how Plum Island is, we just took a chance and bought a house up there, and it's been awesome. We're on the basin side, so probably not necessarily flood prone as some of the other Atlantic facing places, but it's something I definitely worry about.
If you Erin, wait. If you worry about it, you bought a house amidst the worry.
Yeah.
Are you like?
Yeah, we did.
What was the story in the Globe about those people?
Great
Was
story.
it East Ham?
I think it was.
Where
It was
a
down
$2
the
million
Cape somewhere. I think
$2
it was
million
a $3
house
million house
for
He got-
$600,000.
$400,000.
$400,000. Okay.
I think.
And the guy said, "I know I'm going to lose the house, but I'm going to invite all my friends so we can enjoy it in the meantime." Is that you? I mean, is that your thing?
No, definitely. No, not even close.
Okay.
We're so far away. We're a block and a half away from the ocean side. We're more on the basin side, so it is it's a barrier island, and where we are has never flooded. So we've been very lucky at that. But the bridge floods, that whole area getting onto the island floods.
Mm-hmm.
Every year. It's like clockwork.
And that road, Erin, the road that you go on to get out there. I mean, I remember I was up there about a year ago, and the Pink House. Yeah, they resolved the Pink House, didn't they? Haven't they saved the Pink House?
No,
they haven't.
The guy,
No,
someone
they
made
have
an
not.
offer, but it didn't work out.
No, it's not an offer. What they did, from what my understanding is what they did was someone made a $1 million donation to Save the Pink House Foundation. But if you drive by, we're up there even now every couple of weeks, and it's beautiful. Even in the winter, it's just so quiet. There's no windows in the house. It looks like it's going to fall down at any moment. It's really in worse because they did the remediation, and then there was a moratorium the governor put in. So it's another.
Hey, Erin, can we get
issue.
back to the topic you called about? You said a minute ago there's never been a flood where we are. In your part of Plum, but that's like saying there was never a fire that wiped out all of Palisades.
Oh, no, you're right.
In California,
you're 100% correct.
Yeah, okay.
You're 100% correct.
Okay.
I mean, we bought it because we want to spend some time with family and make some memories with our family.
It's great.
Well,
hey, Erin, say hi if we bump into each other in Inman Square. Thanks.
It's just like the gentleman we mentioned before who said he could never afford a house
the Cape guy.
on the ocean, but he decided to do it. If it lasts 2 years, he'll have had 2 years of being with his friends and family in an oceanfront house, and he was going to open it up to people that I think were in hospice care for their last few weeks of life. So, I mean, that's almost the attitude you have to have now. That,
but Erin is not of the opinion that she's going to lose it imminently. It at least didn't sound like that. That guy was totally of the opinion it's going to go, just a question of when.
Well, we just had Sean in the car just texted to say Central Mass, Leominster had horrible flooding just about a year ago.
Yeah.
Montpelier, Vermont did too. So I think the point is, or Ashland, North Carolina, there is no safe place. You get the right conditions together, and you don't know what will happen.
Speaking of Plum Island, I think that's one of the places we discussed a year or so ago about rebuilding. I am of the school that you should be made an offer, as I said before, by the government to buy your stuff, and if you refuse it, you're out of luck. They shouldn't even get permits to build in these areas. I mean, obviously, to rebuild, they need permits from, and I don't know if they can legally be denied. If they can legally be denied, they should be, shouldn't they? People should move. I know their attachment to the area, but the area's been totally destroyed.
Well, I think the problem becomes when taxpayers' money is used to rebuild oceanfront houses. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you have the money and you're willing to take the risk, and I mean, they're going to rebuild out in California, I think now, and they're
exactly my point.
They're going to ease.
So we're going to put firefighters at risk again. We're going to do all this governmental infrastructure in play because you have decided you want to and I understand it, by the way. I would assume if I were in their boat and I had the money, I would want to rebuild too, but it's unwise. Would you not agree it's unwise?
Well, we look at the way a lot of these places are built in California. They're hanging off cliffs, which is one thing for the earthquakes as well. They're hanging off cliffs surrounded by trees. I mean, a lot of them were not in very fire-conscious places to build in the first place.
Well, you know what they said, though? There were a lot of new regulations about the the brush around houses, and and people just ignored it.
Or they were retroactive. They were grandfathered in.
Oh, they were? Okay.
Yeah. Well, some of them that were built before the regulations didn't have to do it, is my understanding.
Catherine in Providence, hi.
Hi there.
Hi.
I just wanted to make a few comments. I work for one of the largest climate environmental groups in the world.
Oh, good.
And so I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist, but I'm in finance. And it's just been absolutely horrifying to watch what's happened over the past week. And I was listening to an earlier conversation about a caller saying, even those of us on the East Coast are vulnerable. And indeed, the whole country is vulnerable on so many levels. And whether it's, wildfires in California or flooding, the unusual flooding that took place in North Carolina because of a hurricane in western North Carolina, all of those issues are climate related. And I think you're right, Marjorie, in saying, in this country, unfortunately, money speaks louder than anything. And I think the insurance issue now is going to be just huge, enormous, whether it's for flooding, areas or wildfires or what have you. I think the insurance piece of this puzzle might actually move the needle a little, hopefully.
Well, I think it's going to prevent people from rebuilding where they probably shouldn't rebuild. I think that's what's going to happen. Yeah,
precisely.
Yeah.
But also, I think we're so concerned, in my world, in my space, because on day one of the new administration, a ton of the wonderful programs that we've worked so hard to put in place, and a lot of the things that were funded through the IRA are going to be cut, just completely cut on day one.
By the way, we discussed that latter thing with Senator Markey, who is pretty involved in almost all these things about this largest climate commitment in American history in the Inflation Reduction Act. And I think he is of the belief that you have, if it isn't spent, it's at risk, which is really just horrifying kind of thing. And other politicians we talk to express hope, but when you're talking to them, Catherine, you get the sense it's hope being placed ahead of reality, because this is the mission of Trump. You read last night, 100 in the neighborhood of 100 executive orders in the first couple of days after he takes over, and I'm sure a lot of those are around the environment. Catherine, call us again. Thanks. We appreciate it.
By the way, this is the Washington Post, which usually is fairly reliable. They're having some travails there at the Washington
Jennifer
Post.
Rubin's leaving, too. Another one.
So maybe they won't be that reliable for that long. But as of today, they say that despite cuts here and there, the overall funding for the Los Angeles Fire Department increased by $80 million, or 9.1%, in the 2024-2025 fiscal year.
Well, there's no question that it might have been the prior that Bass cut $17.9 million out of the budget. Maybe it was the year before. But I think your point is the most important point. Whether it was raised a little or cut a little, there's nobody except Republicans who want to trash Karen Bass who are saying it would have made a difference in the grand scheme of things here.
And as the guy said before, there were not enough fire trucks in all of California, perhaps in the whole West Coast, to attend this massive amount of fires.
Let me just end with this before we take a break. The fire chief there, the woman you were speaking about before, did blame Bass and said because of cuts, and this is I saw this the night before last, there are 1,000 pieces of equipment, as she calls them,
being fixed,
sitting in repair shops that are not being fixed, should be being fixed, and could be available.
Right.
So again, she's not saying we could have prevented this, but I think what she's saying is we could have fought it more effectively had full funding been there. So,
but even if you had those 1,000 pieces of equipment, how many houses have been lost now?
Well, structures, whatever that means, 12, 13,000.
Yeah,
they couldn't.
It wouldn't. Right. It might have helped on the edges, but it wouldn't have helped prevent this disaster, which is related to climate change. I get the last word. You know why? Because
they don't.
This is my radio show. That's why. Listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Up next, we're going to talk with Corby Kummer, and Corby's going to talk about the price of eggs. Buffets are roaring back, and Americans are drinking less. That's all next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, acclaimed choreographer Mark Morris. Inspired by the timeless repertoire of Burt Bacharach, he's bringing the look of love, an evening of dance and song to Boston by way of Global Arts Live. Plus, Mary Grant, president of Mass Art, remembers Jimmy Carter as America's president for the arts. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the Museum of Science, where their Fun for All Ages seasonal exhibit is now open. All aboard Trains at Science Park features more trains, activities, and magic. More at mos.org. And Mass Health Connector, dedicated to expanding health insurance access to uninsured and low-income residents with Connector Care. More at mahealthconnector.org or 1-877-MA.
301-8970. It's about New Year's resolutions and Friday being quitting day or quitter's day or some such thing. 10 days into the new year, that's the average day or some such thing when people quit their resolutions. We want to know, are you among the millions who already given up, or are you sticking to it, and what's your thinking? You can text us at 877-301-8970. Marjorie will read some of these before the 1 o'clock news. Joined now on Zoom by food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner, Corby Kummer, executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Hello there, Corby Kummer.
Hello, Jim. Hello, Marjorie.
Hello,
Hey.
Corby Kummer. So let's start with Tate. That's the bakery and coffee place that a lot of people love to go to get pastries at. Apparently, according to the Boston Globe, Dee Copley and Katie Johnston, about 60 employees at Boston area Tate locations were forced to resign after being flagged by the IRS over paperwork discrepancies involving their immigration status. What's going on?
What's going on is that businesses are worried about the crackdown that's going to begin as soon as, the day after this mass deportation. So it's Social Security number mismatches. And apparently, if you get down into the very good story in the Globe about this by Dee Copley and Katie Johnston, you see that these mismatch warning letters are common for restaurants. It's not just after Trump was elected. But restaurants usually seem to ignore them and nobody comes after them. Now, Tate was saying, when it got it, it started telling all of its employees, you have, I can't remember how long to sort this out or you're going to have to go. Plus, they started offering money for legal assistance to try to help them consult a lawyer. So it's not that they're being cruel and just cutting off all ties before the inauguration. They're saying, this is coming, we're trying to help, but we don't know, we're not going to be able to fight it.
I know you're saying it's not like they're being cruel, but and I know they offered them help with their legal expenses.
$4,000, I think.
Why are we not hearing this from every other restaurant that is dependent upon undocumented workers, which they virtually all are? It sounds to me like they're resisting.
They don't have publicists. They don't have the money to help them with legal assistance. I think this is probably going to happen more and more. I looked at this and I thought this is just the beginning. This is the very tip of the iceberg. That more and more restaurants, also other restaurants, probably want to keep ignoring the letters, waiting till someone comes after them. And it's going to be really bad because I think a quarter of food service workers, does it say someplace, are estimated to be undocumented workers?
Yeah.
It's much higher for harvesting food. And it's the food supply that's going to be really threatened as soon as this crackdown begins. But restaurants, it's going to happen with chains and local restaurants all over the country.
You know the industry about 3,000 times better than I. I may know the food almost as well as you do, but I don't know the industry. I just don't agree with you. I hope I'm right and I hope you're wrong. I think there's going to be a hell of a lot more resistance here. I don't mean active resistance. I mean passive resistance, ignoring this, either because they don't want to force their workers to resign or because they're hoping it's not going to happen because of how dependent they are upon that was Jamie, by the way, in the little shot there, if people were wondering who that person was who stole in here. Because there, despite what you said, Corby, with all due respect, a lot of these restaurant chains have huge PR departments. I think they're deciding we're not going to capitulate. And again, I may be being unfair. It seems to me that despite the offer of legal assistance, Tate is capitulating.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yeah. You can't hear me? Perfect. Now we can't hear you.
Corey,
Okay.
I think you're muted, Corey.
Corby, we call him.
Yeah.
Corey is
There he
his
goes.
cousin.
Tell me whatever you want.
He's
Yeah, go
unmuted.
ahead. Go
There
ahead.
you go.
Go ahead, Corey or Corby, whoever you
There's
are.
going to be more and more resistance. And what I want to see is, are those restaurants going to publicize that they're resisting? I think Tata's getting ahead of it. They're getting ahead of the inauguration, and they wanted to make this announcement. Other places are going to wait to see what happens, how bad the crackdown is. The whole country is in wait and see mode.
Tata, I guess I was calling it
Tate.
Tate.
No, it's like latte. Tate.
Is it Tate? Okay.
Yeah, I'm
all
pretty
right.
sure that's right.
Okay, so Corby Kummer, congestion pricing started in Manhattan. It was supposed to start, I think, last June, but then it was the governor decided to wait after the election.
How incredible is that, by the way? She's
Election has
against it
happened.
until she's elected, and then she's for
Yeah.
it
So
at a lower
what is
figure.
this, yeah, what is it going to mean to restaurants in New York City, specifically in Manhattan?
That they're worried about the cost to their workers to get into Manhattan because so many restaurants, most of them in Manhattan, are in the congestion pricing zone. But what I really learned from this article in the New York Times by Julia Moskin was how frequent deliveries are, and how, we think of them as just being huge Baldor trucks that get in the way, and Cisco that get in the way of one-way traffic. But for restaurants, it's a badge of caring about the quality of food to have more frequent deliveries per week, rather than the system that many food delivery companies set up with big restaurants is just they have padlocks, or they have a way of just dumping the food the minimum amount of time, which sounds really efficient, but the chef or the cook doesn't have any option to say, these look lousy. You're not giving me what I ordered. I'm paying a fortune for this fish. It looks half rotten. Take it back. So that's going to become an expensive luxury. Almost every restaurant quoted in this thorough piece said, we're going to reduce the number of deliveries per week because all of the trucking companies will pass on the higher price of getting in and out of Manhattan to the restaurants, which have to go on menus. Restaurant owners say, already the customers are protesting the rising prices. We can't go any farther with giving them more expensive menu items.
And the thing about the workers, I wasn't aware, I assume, since the subway system there operates around the clock, that I was assuming the vast majority of workers were using that. But the piece in the Times said that most of them, a lot of them, are driving for a variety of legitimate reasons, which means they're losing $45 a week in pay from this alone, $9 a day. Some restaurateurs quoted in the piece said they're compensating their workers, but that's a steep price per person.
It's not only that, where do they park? Because another little figure in the piece about how it's going to discourage suburbanites from coming in to dine in town is that it usually costs them $50 already to park. So if it's costing customers $50 to park at night, not during business hours, what does it cost these workers? Where do they park?
Yeah, I don't understand, same as you, why all that. I've often thought it was easier to park in New York City than it is in Boston, which it is. Is that so few people in New York have cars?
I told Margie a story. This has nothing to do with the restaurant thing, but it's somewhat relevant. When I lived on the Upper West Side, what would happen, it was alternative side of the street parking every single day. What you do is you double park your car on the other side of the street till 2 o'clock. You'd give $5 to a homeless person and the key to the car, and a different homeless person took each block. So you'd get to know the person. This is his or her block. The next block is somebody else's. They'd move your car back to the other side at 2 o'clock and leave your key on the top of the tire. I never heard of a car being stolen. It was this incredible industry that propped up. Look at the look on Corby. It has nothing to do with the restaurant people. I have no idea what they're doing, but that's how we conquered the
bygone days of urban trust, Jim.
Exactly. That doesn't exist anymore. We're talking to Corby Kummer, our food guy.
So this was an interesting story also in the Washington Post, talking about how Americans drank less alcohol even before the Surgeon General weighed in and said that there's no good amount of alcohol for you. So what's up with that?
Fascinating piece by Hannah Ziegler in the Post. about Gen Z. Okay, one of you knows exactly what Gen Z is. But Gen Z consumers older than 21, 45%.
Yeah, I
said
was
they didn't
stunned.
consume any alcoholic
None.
drinks in 2023, which must be the most recent data. But Gen Z is saying, nope, we don't want alcohol. And almost every age group is radically reducing its amount of alcohol, except of course during COVID. So it's, post-COVID, because sales went way up. Problem drinking went way up, especially among older adults during COVID, and we've read about binge drinking continuing. But the decline in sales of everything, especially wine, the wine industry is really threatened because people in all categories are just less interested in wine than they've been in beer and hard liquor.
Can I say something about wine? If people didn't listen to our
What?
show the day the great couple that do Urban Grape came on.
Oh, yeah,
We
they
hadn't
had a
talked
great
about the
store.
tariff thing, and they made an interesting, and beyond, they say how damaging the tariffs could be to them and their industry. The thing I hadn't thought about is even if Trump was right, and by tariffing and making more expensive things manufactured overseas, it will encourage manufacture here. They went on to make the point, you can't manufacture the same wine that you may import from the blank region of Italy, which may be a favorite of one of your customers. So I guess the point they were trying to make was that they're doubly harmed, even more than some other industries in the wine industry. Is that what you're encountering in your wine store, wine importing friends, Corby Cumber?
Sure, that's a real problem with wine because almost every other industry can look to another country, another source that has fewer tariffs or has cheaper prices. But if this couple from Urban Grape has been spending months and years making their customers acquire a taste for a certain wine, they're going to have to say, well, we found one that's affordable at your price point that offers nearly all the advantages. So they can do it, I think. It's just going to be a lot more work.
We don't know why people are drinking less, or do we know? Maybe it's the
Nothing in
Donald
this
Trump
explain
effect.
why, except that Gen Z doesn't view it as essential for recreation.
Yeah.
There was some sort of weak speculation about cannabis legalization being a form of recreation and how to alter consciousness, but there was no good data on it, whether it's a substitute for alcohol. So, drink less but better. No really good plausible explanation.
What's the history of what the impact of pronouncements by surgeon generals is on health issues? I mean, the first time I ever heard of it was, what's his name? The smoking thing. And Coop, was that his name?
Everett
No,
Koop.
no.
Yeah.
Surgeon General Coop was HIV, and
I thought he was-
mentioning getting the country. I can't remember the name. It was 1963 or 4.
Well, we'll check it out. But does that trickle down to people, or do people ignore it? I know this change was pre-Surgeon General pronouncement. What's the expectation of what the pronouncement by the Surgeon General, whenever it was a month ago, will have?
What it is a great big flag to the public that alcohol, you can't argue that it causes cancer. There's lots of, and that as with cigarettes, the Merchants of Doubt, the name of that great, is it Errol Morris documentary about fighting the tobacco industry, fighting the whole idea that studies were definitive. Apparently, the most inarguable data is around cancer, especially breast cancer. 1 in 6 women. I mean, cases of breast cancer attributed to alcohol. Very shocking.
Incredible.
There's lots and lots of data about cardiovascular disease, but there's more doubt and opposing data around cardiovascular disease. So the Surgeon General went with the strongest data and said there should be warning labels. And now I think the public is going to understand in the back of its mind, because I don't think this is going to go anywhere in terms of actually get those warning labels. But what it does is it triggers the industry to fight it and to say this isn't really right. Probably Vivek Murthy waited until the very end because the election was over and it wasn't politically risky for the administration to come out against the alcohol industry. It does have results, and it's all the Surgeon General can do, because recall the Surgeon General doesn't have authority to issue labels, only Congress, and the Surgeon General has an absurdly low budget for the amount of work and public visibility she or he is supposed to have.
I don't like the Surgeon General wearing a military uniform or whatever that thing is. By the way,
They can't not. They are rear admirals.
I don't care what they are.
Part of the Navy.
Okay, fine. Let me just say this to you. You were right. Not only were you right about it being a different Surgeon General, I never even heard of this Surgeon General.
Neither did I.
In 1964, Surgeon General, thank you, Jamie, I think, Luther Terry identified smoking as the cause of lung cancer and a likely cause of heart disease. Terry called for, quote, appropriate remedial action to address the negative effects. Luther Terry, whoever the hell he is.
You know, I'm obviously no fan of the president-elect, but it is interesting, if any. You know, Trump is talked a lot about not ever drinking. He talked about his brother, the alcoholic. I forget.
Biden doesn't drink either, does he?
Well, I don't think you can be drinking that much when you're running the world anyway. But I think it's interesting that he's just never had a drink. And he talked about it in one of the bro podcasts. I forget if it was Joe Rogan or Theo Voss or one of those guys. But it was pretty compelling listening to him talk about why he doesn't drink.
I can't believe you made the comment, if you're the leader of the world, you'd probably not want to drink. I would think the exact opposite. You would want to drink yourself into like...
Well, I think Tricky Dick was drinking a lot in the final days.
That's
it didn't work
Kissinger
that
said,
well,
didn't
I don't think. Yeah.
So, Corby, Kara Baskin has a piece that is near and dear to my heart, which we're going to discuss with listeners at 1:30. I would bet that there's an I think this is the wrong term, inverse proportion between the number of times I've been to an all-you-can-eat buffet and the number of times Corby has. So, Corby, raise your right hand and tell us in your whole life, how many times have you been to an all-you-can-eat buffet other than for work? Go ahead.
Other than for work.
None, right? Zero.
No, maybe two.
Maybe
in my
two.
Entire
Maybe
lifetime.
2,000 in my lifetime.
I've been to a lot too.
So, what's your take on the buffet? The thesis is part of Baskin's thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marjorie. Is because of inflation, even though these are mostly expensive, all you can eat is a big kind of deal. She goes on to make, I like her a lot, a ridiculous notion that you'll make friends at the roast beef slicing
she just said it
counter
was really
or whatever.
fun. She went to Henrietta's Table over
She
there
did.
in Cambridge, and they had a lot of bacon, as I recall, at the Henrietta's Table Sunday morning buffet.
Oh, that was a brunch thing she went to?
Yeah, I think so.
So how do you, this is like a gourmand kind of thing, which is who I am. What's your take on the buffet and American food history there, Corby Comer?
You know, when you're thinking about making the economics pencil out, which is what she tried to do at the very end. So for one brunch unlimited buffet at Henrietta's Table, which I'm a huge fan of, and think they have very high quality ingredients, I really like Henrietta's Table and go there often. $79
a lot.
for $80 for breakfast or lunch. That is a lot of money. And she said that it all worked out because she had 4 full plates of food. It was only $20.
It's my kind of woman.
But she had to have 4 full plates of food at the same sitting. And then what did she do at night? So, you know, the whole idea is, are you able or willing to have only one meal a day that really theoretically has enough calories and food to last you for 2 days? The advantage I see to ever making it worth it is if you have a real hankering for something you can't afford otherwise, like raw fish for sushi, the highest quality raw fish, or high quality caviar, which will never fit into a $79 buffet because it's way too expensive. But if you really love something and, you know, overeating on it isn't actually going to be that much food, it would just cost a fortune otherwise. That way I would do it. Jim, you're just laughing because that's
No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing, again, this is a great piece by Kara, and she has 7 reasons, which we'll share with you at 1:30 if you haven't read it yet. But I want to read Friendship Potential, number 4. On my visit to the extensive foie gras station, I witnessed a fellow waxing poetic about birding. Over by the antipasti bar, a woman dressed in an elf costume, and I made polite chit-chat. She later resurfaced to take a picture of my friends and me, and also photobombed us. In a traditional restaurant setting, it's just you and whoever you came in with. At a buffet, you're never sure whom you'll meet. In an isolated world, this is a salve. I mean, really? How many times at a buffet, Marjorie, have you ever met a new friend that has become a BFF? I mean, really.
I think we needed to know from Kara Baskin, why was the person in the elf costume at Henrietta Table's brunch? We never found that out. You know, would you normally go to a brunch in an elf outfit? I don't think so, Corby.
I also really wanted to know would Kara Baskin ever have had these conversations if she didn't have to fill inches because she knew she was writing a column about buffets?
Oh well,
is
that's
this
a
your
writer's
natural
that's a
bent?
writer's dilemma.
Can I tell you?
Can
Let
you
me
bring
just.
home a doggy bag at a buffet?
No.
No, and that's the whole point. That's
Marjorie,
why
you
it
got to
doesn't
be work out
work
kidding.
economically.
Can I tell you one thing, though? She mentions, I can't remember, maybe it is at Henrietta's table because that's what she was talking about. The key when you're deciding what buffet to go to, I'll give more advice.
food.
No. It's not just expensive
Oh.
food. That's important.
Okay.
What's really important is that they give you a clean plate every time
That's
you
right.
stand up
Very
to go
important.
back. Because there's nothing more disgusting than going back for your 9th helping and you still have all this crap on your plate. You really are praying
Oh,
you're
the
going to get a
maple
clean
syrup
plate.
It's
and the
such
butter.
enabling behavior. But the Las Vegas approach is because buffets used to be a big thing. Apparently, they kind of stopped during COVID, and also it wasn't working out economically for the restaurants. It was like the automat. It was plate after plate after plate. You took the small plate, and then you had to go back for another small plate. You couldn't heap the plate. So it's airline lounges. Why haven't we talked about airline lounges?
Do they have buffets?
They're the equivalent right now, yeah.
I didn't know they had buffets in airline lounges. Did you?
I'll be in an
They have
airline
fortunes
lounge by
and
3
long.
o'clock today. Had I known that, I would have gone for breakfast. Okay, Corby.
Okay, Corby Comer, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
To Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Lawrence General Hospital, now united with Holy Family Hospital to help build a robust regional healthcare system defined by a shared commitment to patient-centered care and medical excellence. More at lawrencegeneral.org. Discover amazing treasures in Arkansas, including an Arnold Palmer engraved golf club and an Elvis Presley signed ice cream display. Guess the top find on
The service is forecasting wind gusts of up to 70 miles per hour this week. Tens of thousands of people remain under evacuation orders, and L.A. County Fire Chief Anthony Maroney signaled that would not end anytime soon.
Repopulation will not occur until all areas are safe.
The fires have killed at least 24 people. Thousands more structures are destroyed. In some cases, entire neighborhoods are in charred ruin. Meanwhile, dozens of people have been arrested for looting, and officials say they're now seeing more cases of price gouging. Rental home prices in the region are spiking as the wildfires force, again, thousands of people to look for new housing. From member station LAist, David Wagner reports a listing on Zillow shows that the rent on one property increased nearly 86% since September.
The furnished four-bedroom home in Bel Air was listed Saturday morning, days after the fires broke out, for $29,500 per month. That's up from $15,900 in September. The home's rental agent, Fiora Aston with Compass, said she told her client,
"People are desperate and you can probably get good money and you should move out." She has a second home. So she moved into her second home.
The listing was taken down a few hours after the interview. Journalists for the New York Times and the LA Times are spotting other listings with huge...
Full week in the White House before President-elect Donald Trump is inaugurated. As NPR's Asma Khalid tells us, Biden is beginning his farewell with a final foreign policy speech today.
The president is delivering remarks at the State Department about his foreign policy legacy. It's a full-circle moment for Biden. Shortly after entering the White House 4 years ago, he made a trip to the State Department to give a speech about America's place in the world. He intends now to talk about the work he's done to rebuild alliances and strengthen the United States' global leadership. But it will undoubtedly also be a moment for him to defend his own choices around some key foreign policy challenges for which he has been criticized, such as the withdrawal from Afghanistan and the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Asma Khalid, NPR News.
From Washington, this is NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey delivers her State of the Commonwealth speech this Thursday, and the governor has already sent out watch party invites to her top supporters. According to the invite, the event, which coincides with her 6:30 p.m. speech on Thursday, will be followed by a reception with refreshments and hors d'oeuvres. And with more than $2.5 million in federal funds secured, the Association to Preserve Cape Cod will begin a project to restore the Mashpee River. Wampanoag Tribal Chairman Brian Whedon says the river is a vital part of the tribe's history and culture.
When the heron come up from the oceans and pass through that river out into the pond, that's when we know it's our springtime and our Wampanoag New Year. So the pond and the water has always been, sacred areas, and the river have always been, special areas to the tribe.
The river has been badly degraded over the years, in part by the cranberry industry, which diverted its flow. Restoration will include reclaiming a defunct cranberry bog and restoring fish passage in the upper part of that river. The Mashpee River runs about 5 miles from Mashpee-Wakeby Pond to Pompanesett Bay. In sports, tonight's NFC wildcard playoff game has Minnesota at the LA Rams. The Patriots are right now introducing Mike Vrabel as their new head coach. Esteban Bustillos is there. He'll have more later in the day. Mostly sunny, low 40s today, clear and mid-20s overnight. Mostly sunny, low 30s tomorrow. We're at 39 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy. Clients are matched with one of 35,000 therapists and can communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Brighton Studio 3 and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell. She's going to be with us from 1 to 2, taking our questions and yours. We'll also talk to John King and Trenny Casey about Mike Vrabel and the Patriots. Our text prompt of the day at 877-301-8970 is inspired by Jim's incredible fortitude in keeping up his New Year's resolution for 2 whole weeks. We're asking you, January 10th, that was Friday, was officially Quitter's Day, and we are now 2 weeks into the new year. So how are your resolutions going?
Never better.
Have you joined the millions who've already thrown in the towel? Text us at 877-301-8970, and we'll read your answers shortly before the 1 p.m. news. Hello again, Jim.
Hey, before we introduce Elon, I want to say one thing that we omitted, which I feel bad about, which I heard on the NPR news at the top of the hour when we were talking about the LA fires.
Yes.
One of the other atrocities is, did you hear about rent gouging in places in and around Los Angeles?
And
not just hotels, rentals
homes,
for apartments and things. And it's in violation of law, but they're figuring that the people in law enforcement are preoccupied with other things. Rent's going up 50 to 100% in some communities, essentially screwing these people who have been screwed enough, I should say, to use the term of art, but we'll revisit that probably tomorrow. Joined now, actually, we're going to talk to Elon about it a little bit too. We're joined now on Zoom by Elon Stavins, Professor of Humanities and Latin American and Latino Culture at Amherst College, also the co-author of the cookbook Sabor Judío, the Jewish-Mexican cookbook, which I love. Elon, it's good to see you. Welcome.
It's such a pleasure.
And for us.
Yeah, great to see you again, too, Elon. So the President-elect Trump says he wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Could that even happen? How so? And what are the pros and cons?
Could that even happen with Trump having both chambers on his side and being more deliberate this time? I think it could. Let's remember, though, that all names in this nation, all names in this continent have been up for grabs from the moment that the Europeans arrived. Many of the Native American names started to disappear and they have changed over time. I'm surprised he wants to name it Gulf of America. America is not only the name of this country, it's the name of the entire continent, and the U.S. actually stole that name. Probably he should have said the Gulf of United States or the Trump dump. I think that would have been the best approach. I would have voted for that.
You know, one of the things I loved, and I'm guessing you did too, we talked to you a lot about Claudia Sheinbaum before she was elected the first woman and the first Jewish president of Mexico. But unlike what we've discussed ad nauseum on the show, is huge corporate leaders totally capitulating to Trump on everything, anticipatory obedience, the term we've borrowed. and university presidents in lots of places too, Harvard being, in our opinion, amongst them. Scheinbaum is not taking any crap. Here is her first speaking in Spanish, and you hear the English translation. She's sarcastically responding to Trump's comments about the Gulf of America. This is during a press conference in Mexico City. Here it is.
Obviously, the name Gulf of Mexico is recognized by the United Nations, by a United Nations agency. Why don't we call it Mexican America? It sounds nice, right? Since 1607, the Constitution of Apatzingan referred to it as Mexican America. We're going to call it Mexican America. It sounds beautiful, right?
Se oye bonito, ¿no? I also love that she said it sounds beautiful because the expression that Trump uses about everything, beautiful name, beautiful this, beautiful whatever. Good for her. I mean, you love that, right? Did you not like that?
I love it, Jim. And I think that she has what we call in Spanish huevos, balls, and I don't want her to give that up. She has more courage than her predecessor, López Obrador. She is rising up to the occasion and saying what is in the mind of many Mexicans and many Latin Americans. I should notice also that Trump wants Canada to be the 51st state, yeah, but not Mexico. He never really said, I want to buy Mexico after Greenland. I think that he would never say that.
So, Elon Stavins,
are we leaving naming yet?
Go ahead,
I have to say, I never thought about this until anticipating you coming on. Naming matters. I mean, it really, I don't mean the Gulf of America versus Gulf of Mexico, but naming in a lot of things. And there was a story I read about how Trump did change the names of some entities in his first administration, as others have done. Was it Mount McKinley that Obama changed back to its native name? And it can mean a lot of things. Significance, either because it is significant, there's a change in function, a change in something, or just to evidence control of a particular thing. So it does. What's in a name is a lot, actually. No.
What's in a name, as Shakespeare puts it in Romeo and Juliet, is crucial. In the Bible, Jim, Adam is the first one to appropriate objects and animals in the Garden of Eden by naming one after another, in connecting the words to each of those objects. Names mean power, names mean control. Names also mean that the power and control lasts as long as those that are naming them are around. When they move out, other generations come in with other agendas, other perspectives. So names are always for grab. Trump has this penchant for naming everything or abusing cynically people's names by twisting them and turning them around. He knows that that is a strategy of control and power, certainly. And I think that is behind what he's trying to do here again.
Yeah, one of these stories points out how he repeatedly called NAFTA a job-killing disaster, and that was very effective for him on the campaign trail because a lot of people did not end up liking NAFTA very much at all.
Even though his change were minor in the grand scheme of things.
But it was effective.
But it was a control thing, again, that he owned it as opposed to what Clinton had negotiated years before. We're talking to Elon Stavins from Amherst College.
So, Elon Stavins, we talked to our food guy, Corby Kummer, before about some restaurants. There's one, Tate in Boston, that was forcing people to resign, really worried about their immigration status because many people in food service are not documented. I'm wondering if you have a sense that we're prepared in general. Where was a story last week about the schools guarding themselves against what would happen if anybody came in to look for students who may have been undocumented, and that's everywhere: courts, schools, hospitals, places of work. Are we prepared for this, or is it just going to be a case by case and take your chances kind of deal?
I don't think we are prepared. A big onslaught of abuse is likely to take place. There are over 11 million undocumented individuals in the United States. Many of them are very young. They are part of the DACA, the Dreamers group. Particular industries like construction, like restaurants, will suffer dramatically. Those are the workers that are eager and always in the forefront. It will be very difficult for the Trump administration to establish a clear separation between those that they described as being criminal, of having committed a robbery or having had some kind of suspicious past from many, many, many others that are essential for the infrastructure of this country. In California right now, with the rebuilding of so many neighborhoods that is likely to take place, who is going to do that job? The people that are going to be immigrants that are going to be eager to take that job because there's nothing else and because they come from another part of the world. So it's going to be a challenge between cleansing up this country, the word is so frightening, and the reality that we need hands and passion and devotion and commitment from that group of people that is eager to help.
You know, I was thinking a lot about what you were just talking about. Well, a couple of things. One, Scheinbaum is sending a ton of firefighters from Mexico. Right. They're wonderful stories, humanitarian stories about undocumented people in and around LA County who are just on their own, not part of any organized effort, going to try to save houses, take care of people. There are tons of stories, as you say, about who's going to rebuild these communities, whether it's in the same place or an adjoining community, undocumented people. I know we're in a fact-resistant era in this country, but does that have any impact on this debate? Wait a second. Those people who are allegedly a great risk to us, even though they've done nothing wrong except try to take care of their family or escape violence, they're helping the same people who were watching on television lose everything. And does that have any impact, or is everybody so baked into their positions that those kinds of things don't even matter?
I think that in this country, the dollar sign counts for more than anything else. And eventually, no matter where the policies seem to be or what the big messages are sent out, if there is labor that is needed and there is nobody else that is going to do it, the dollar sign is going to point in the direction of those immigrants that are going to be able to do this. I don't, and particularly with an individual like Trump, who has used undocumented individuals
in Mar-a-Lago,
right? Absolutely, to build. So the cynicism here is substantial.
Well, you know, so you are, in a perverse way, I'm asking, not fairly optimistic then about outcomes. I mean, obviously they're going to try to start this with this tough guy Homans, who likes to berate democratically elected mayors and others, because it shows what a tough guy he is, that it's all going to start on day one. But when the agriculture industry, when the service industry, including restaurants in particular, are at great risk, you think that's ultimately what matters, because the people who own those more than likely are those who support Donald Trump.
Absolutely. I think we're going to see a lot of images of fear, but ultimately there's going to come some moment of reckoning and recognizing that the infrastructure needs to be attended, and that those that are ready to do so are going to be hired. It is the businesses that are going to be complaining to, and not the unions as much, to the Trump administration. And the businesses are the ones that are going to be hurt by this administration. So I do believe that the initial months that are coming are absolutely frightening, but ultimately some sense of balance and some sense of coherence and logic will follow in a country that pays so much attention to the economic side.
Well, I'm kind of hoping that there might be, who knows? I mean, I'm hoping that there's going to be more talk than action here. But I could be wrong. This brings us to this Lake and Riley bill. People may recall she was a young nursing student in Georgia who was murdered by an undocumented immigrant last year. There's this bill that got some support from at least 9 Democrats in the Senate that would allow.
Wasn't it all but 9? All but 9,
yeah.
So that's whatever it is, 40 something. It's a lot of Democrats.
Yeah,
exactly. But they joined all but 9 joined these Republicans to advance this bill, which would seem to me to have a due process problem to detain people just accused of theft if they are in the country illegally. That means you're detained like in a cell somewhere with no hearing, no nothing.
And it can include shoplifting, by the way.
Yeah, these are not violent crimes. You're already in big trouble, obviously, for violent crimes. But this is like you steal something from the supermarket.
There seems to be some kind of logic here from the Democrats' measure of saying we'll have to give in to some thing that this administration wants, to make them feel that we are not total enemies. But go on.
Well, I mean, their position, and I think there's some merit to this, not their bottom line. Their analysis is one of the reasons why the Democrats lost the House, the Senate, and the presidency was over immigration. They couldn't make the case effectively enough that they had a solution, but that Donald Trump instructed his Republican sycophants to oppose it because he then wouldn't have an issue in the election. And because they failed at that message, they have to go along with things that they would otherwise not. And to me, the naivete is, do they think they're going to get credit for something that the Republicans are championing because they're voting for that and still not be blamed as resistors?
Look at what they're voting for. This is what's horrifying to me. You could not like the Mexican guy next door. Maybe he was making a lot of noise, fixing his car or something like that. And you could be some jerk and you could call him up and say, I saw him stealing something or he stole my lawnmower.
Yeah, but this is what's pending. And they want to be able to say they voted for something.
But
I'm not
this
defending
is really
it.
extreme.
I agree with you.
Detain somebody on an accusation with no court hearing, no nothing. I just
it's shocking that a politician would take an unprincipled position
I find
for
this
personal advancement.
Am I crazy? This is no due process, no nothing. You're behind bars.
You know, it used to be toward the end of the election that the party that seemed to be in agony and not knowing what it wanted was the Republican Party. And now, some months after the election, it seems that it's the Democratic Party, the one that is in a deep process of reconsidering its mission because of the results of that election, and giving in and giving up many of its missions in the quest of trying to figure out how it reconnects with the electorate is going to be difficult to witness. I am worried about the volatility of some of the opinions of the Democrats that will want to be seen as either partners or supporters of certain aspects of Trump. And I am very worried about the difference between the arrival of Trump in the first administration to the second administration. It seems to me that he had an antagonistic view. Everybody was opposed. There were marches. And now that he's arriving in a week plus, there seems to have been a surrendering of many of the opponents that are kind of ready to see what happens and are much more quiet. And that frightens me because he is now kind of the king. We didn't used to have a king in this country, but he's behaving like a king.
So what would your message be if the Democratic caucus of the House or the Senate said, come talk to us and tell us what we should do, rather than sign on to what Marjorie correctly calls a totally due process void measure that runs afoul of everybody who believes in the rule of law and that sort of thing? What do they do, since they did fail at telling their story? This morning, for example, on NPR, the head of Homeland Security for Biden was on talking about how the last 6 months since Biden got tough on this thing, the number of people crossing the border is down dramatically. Almost nobody knows that except people who follow this thing with a passion. So what should their strategy be to show that we care about the issue, but we're not going to just jump onto any Republican anti-human train?
Jim, coming from Latin America, from Mexico, as I do, where dictatorship ruled for several decades, it is the opposition that ultimately has the moral banner and that it really speaks for the people. I think that the Democrats need to recognize that having the new role of being on the opposing side is actually very important for the rest of us, and that one has to not surrender one's own vision. One has to stand up to bullies. I think the opposing side is going to be the one that will need much more definition this time than what Trump already is doing and what he's going to be able to accomplish. But we will see if the Democrats are eager and ready and figure out how to stand up and be coherent and reconnect with people. It's not an
one of
easy
the other things I don't understand, maybe you can explain to me, is I'm an admirer so far, even though I don't have nearly the level of understanding of Scheinbaum's agenda than you. She has said apparently in a reversal, that Mexico will consider taking people who are deported from this country who are not from Mexico, which seems to me to make Trump's task easier. These are from some countries in Latin or South America who were said they were unwilling to take people who were deported from the United States who were originally theirs back. Isn't she essentially facilitating mass deportation by doing this?
What she's doing, Jim, and I hope I'm right on this, is that she is positioning herself as a spokesperson for the Latin American republics as a whole, not only for Mexico. She has that capacity as a woman, as a member of a minority, as the leader of one of the most, if not the most significant partner with the United States, to not only be the president of Mexico, but be the president, so to speak, of many Latin Americans. And if she looks for some conciliatory sides, but also pulls in the opposite direction, I think that other governments are going to come along with her, and there's going to be a unified bloc, which I think Latin America needs now, instead of this segregated, fragmented countries each pushing in different directions. You should also remember that the president of Honduras, also a woman, also stood up to Trump and said, if they are going to send undocumented immigrants back, we're going to close the military base that we have here in this country, which is a very important one. So I think that some leaders in Latin America are coming together to figure out a tone. It's not a tone of antagonism, and I think Scheinbaum is perfectly positioned to represent many of them with clarity, with her scientific mind, and with the huevos, with the guts that she has.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned the two women, because in the United States of America, it has been women from Nancy Pelosi to Liz Cheney to 26-year-old Cassidy Hutchinson, who stood up to Donald Trump, testified against him, while the 50-something white guys with big jobs and tons of money just... And now we're watching Zuckerberg do it and Bezos do it.
We need more women like that.
We need more women, absolutely.
Yes.
But speaking of women or young girls, there's a great little story here about boys joining in on, I'm going to mispronounce this,
Quinceañera.
Yes.
Quinceañera.
Which I've always thought of as 15-year-old girls, teenage girls. Now, apparently the boys are getting in on the deal?
It's such an interesting story. It's happening in Corpus Christi, in different parts of Texas, also in New Mexico, in parts of California. The ancestral tradition of having the quinceañera party to celebrate the arrival to adulthood of young women is now being kind of gender neutralized, because there are boys that are also celebrating the quinceañero, meaning the manuscript, the masculine version of that. Some say that this is proof that machismo is giving in and giving up, and there are different ways of looking at things. Others think, why take away something that is exclusively for women and that has been so beautifully developed over the years? I should also say that, like Dia de los Muertos, quinceañera is celebrated in the United States by the Latino community, mostly Mexican and Central American, much more than in Mexico and in Central America. It's really a Latino, an American tradition of the Hispanic population.
Okay, so nice try there, Elon. You first say, some are saying this, others are saying this. Are you some or are you other? Which are you? What do you think of this?
I am in favor of having a quinceañera even for 63-year-olds like me.
Well, it's a great party. Get a lot of gifts, right? Probably pocket some cash. So I can see why the boys want to get out of that, too.
Is it sort of like a bar mitzvah for...
It's like a bar mitzvah 2 years later with mariachis and with a lot of tacos and quesadillas, which I think is great for bar mitzvahs as well.
Boy, I would have loved that at mine. Let me tell you, I really would have. Hey, Elon Stavins, wonderful to see you as always. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.
For us as well. Thanks.
We have been speaking with Elon Stavins, Professor of Humanities and Latin American and Latino Culture at Amherst College. Okay, coming up after a quick break, Dr. Catherine Gerger-Barnett of Boston Medical Center is with us. We're going to talk to her about climate change and teenagers' mental health, young people in general, and dealing with dementia that's now endured by her brilliant father, David Gergen, and advisor to 4 different United States presidents. Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
There's a glut of new fiction titles coming out in the next couple months. Among them, a book called Dream State by Eric Puchner.
It's this real interesting meditation on marriage and on male friendships and the sort of what ifs in life.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. We delve into a few upcoming releases, including what we know about the new Hunger Games book, on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Boston Medical Center, committed to delivering medical excellence that empowers all patients. Learn more about how BMC's team of experts is rewriting healthcare for cancer, sickle cell, and beyond at bmc.org. And Furniture Consignment Gallery, curating pre-owned luxury home furnishings for over 30 years. Current inventory is available to view in their showrooms in Burlington, Natick, Hanover, and Plymouth. More at FurnitureConsignment.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live in Studio 3 of GBH here and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're at the library tomorrow. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, we've got a lot of stuff for her. I'm sure you guys do too. 1 to 2 tomorrow. Final reminder about our text prompt of the day at 877-301-8970. New Year's resolutions now passed. Quitter's Day is what it's called. The 10th of January is when I guess the average number of, majority of people quit, whatever they do. Are you still keeping your resolutions? If you are, how you doing? And if you're not and you gave up like millions of Americans, let us know that too and why. Again, you text 877-301-8970. We'll read them shortly before the 1 o'clock news. Join now in Studio 3 by Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett, Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation in the Department of Family Medicine at Boston Medical Center. I called it Boston City Hospital the other day. I realized on the air. That was like, 100 years ago?
Yeah.
An associate professor at the Boston University Chobanian and Avedisian, is that how you pronounce it?
That's correct.
School of Medicine, an associate at Harvard's Center for Primary Care, and health innovator, a fellow at the Aspen Institute. Doctor, it's great to see you.
It's wonderful being with you. Thank you.
So, Doctor, you wrote a beautiful piece about your father, David Gergen. People, I no doubt, have seen him on television over the years. They've seen him at the right hand of 4 different presidents whom he served for and was an advisor to, about his battle. Well, I shouldn't say battle. About his dealing with something called Lewy body dementia. Tell us what's going on with your dad.
So thank you. This was an incredibly difficult piece to write, but I also really felt that it was part of my dad's public service journey, which is even in his illness, he had moments of clarity where he really called to action the country and thinking through some of the importance of us using our resilience, our grit, remembering the strength of our country, really calling people to service, recognizing that young people need to step into service roles as well. And so I used the opportunity to really share with the country more about Lewy body dementia, first of all, because I think that a lot of people, either if they have a loved one struggling from dementia or, their own personal journey, there's so much stigma still associated with dementia, and people really don't talk enough about it. We know that Alzheimer drugs have made some progress, but Lewy body dementia, believe it or not, and I think people have been surprised by this, is the second leading cause of dementia.
After Alzheimer's?
After Alzheimer's, exactly. So 1.4 million Americans have Lewy body dementia.
How hard was this for you to write?
It was like a lot of my writing, it was sort of living inside of me for a while. I didn't know when I would be ready to actually send it to the editor at the Boston Globe, Marjorie Pritchard, who's an amazing colleague and has been a real support for me at the Boston Globe. But once it was out, it actually became this, had a life of its own. And it was not just about my grief, but we got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails from people who admired my father and the role he played in politics, but also shared their own journey with loved ones' dementia, with a lot of gratitude.
Can you just read
that.
even a
paragraph
or a half?
I want to say you described this as a wrecking ball.
Yeah.
Careening into the fortress of your father's mind. So tell us what it's like to interact and read us a little bit from that part.
Yeah, so I will just begin in the beginning, in part because it shares a bit more about this story. The dragonfly swarmed in pairs above our heads, a hawk dropped in the distance, and the glass-like water sliced open with each slow stroke of our arms. Swimming beside me was my father, once a powerfully large and imposing figure. My father's arms and legs had become shriveled, and his body gaunt. My attention to the slow unfolding of a late summer's day continued to swing back to him. Was the water shallow enough for him to stand if needed? Was his increased weakness causing him to pause, or was it a new gauze of confusion? His nights were punctuated by vivid dreams, ones of spiders that any nightmare could hold. But perhaps more unique to this increasingly gentle giant of a man falling from the world were dreams of loss and hope, that were like shadows of his seemingly outsized prior life as an apolitical commentator and advisor to 4 presidents. And I went on below to really share about this wrecking ball. So,
and what his advice was for people and his belief in service and all that kind of...
Before we go to that, though, you talk about what this does in the 4th paragraph down, cognitive decline, tremors, sleep disturbances,
so I shared more about the pathophysiology of Lewy body dementia, again, which is, despite being the second most common cause of dementia, is a different kind of physiology than Alzheimer's. So it is actually these protein kind of aggregates that happen in the brain that are made from a different kind of protein than we have in Alzheimer's. And it affects not just the mind, but also the body. And so it creates, I shared, which is, I think, probably the closest approximation that we have to it, is it's like Alzheimer's meets Parkinson's, right? And so it affects actually 2 specific neurotransmitters for those who want to know more. One is acetylcholine and one is dopamine. And as a result, the memory goes, but also the ability to move goes. So people really slow down, and then they start having all kinds of difficulty mobilizing, and then their internal kind of organs slowly break down.
We both want to talk to you a little bit about how we're doing on the dementia front in terms of slowing down and
totally.
But can we just talk about your dad just for a second, if we can?
Of course.
When you keep saying a giant of a man, for people who've met David,
literally,
he is physically huge, and I hope people don't think that's all we're talking about. Being in this guy's presence is immense. And every time, I know, particularly when I was doing Greater Boston here, every time Azita or one of the people working on the show would say David Gergen's on tonight, I can't tell you how excited I was. Not because the wisdom, the humor, the guy he's just such a grown-up and a caring soul. And what we pulled, by the way, here's a little sound. This is one of my favorite segments ever. I don't know if I ever told you this. Here is Dr. Gergen Barnett with her father, David. They're both on together on Greater Boston. It was in 2020. David was discussing how the pandemic put a spotlight on Trump's actions, and his daughter was sharing how this was affecting clinicians. I'm not going to play that part, but here's a nice moment from the end of the interview. David speaking first, and then you'll hear this.
If you really want to test of a leader, it is how much do they grow in the job? Yeah. And that's a good test of a president. And one right now, I'm afraid our current president just doesn't have the grade we're looking for.
Before you two leave, how'd you like working with your kid, and how'd you like working with your father tonight? Yes?
Awesome.
2 smiles.
Yeah, thumbs up.
I loved it. Yes. Thumbs up. That was totally great. I mean, and one of the things I love about your father is, and Marjorie and I talk about this a lot, he really called him as he saw him.
Yeah.
He was not one of those people who came in with, an agenda, I'm a partisan. I mean, his honesty and his breadth of experience and his authenticity is just, it's huge. I mean, the guy has really been a really important force. And I'll never forget this, the first person to talk about Donald Trump having a narcissistic, whatever, you're the doctor, disorder in a piece he wrote for CNN in 2015, by the way.
Yeah.
Even before his
My
first
mom's
term.
a therapist, so she helped
Oh,
him
I
on
didn't
that
know.
one.
I've met her. I
Yeah,
didn't know she was a therapist.
She definitely pulled him out to the DSM and, help with that diagnosis.
But you know what I was thinking too, just in terms of the dementia, there he was just a very short time ago.
Yeah.
Which said something about how fast this can come on.
Yeah. So everybody's journey is different. But part of what can happen is when you have a lot of protective brain cells, like my father did, he was very stable for a long time and then quickly diminished.
How hard is this for you? We almost never talk about caregivers, and you've been a principal caregiver here, I know. How hard is this for you?
It is the hardest and most beautiful thing I've ever had to do is to be with him in this time.
Good for you, Dr.
So
Catherine
how are we doing
Barnett.
on we read about a drug. Oh, wait, it's not meeting its expectations. Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're not in cure range yet, but we are talking about slowing down.
Sure.
Well, tell us what the state of research is.
So, I mean, the biggest advances have been made in Alzheimer's, which is, thank goodness, because that's the most common cause of dementia. We have over 5 million people living with Alzheimer's. There's 2 drugs that have been approved that are very good, well, all relative, because, again, this has been a very hard nut to crack, on diminishing or slowing down the decline. It does not heal Alzheimer's, so it slows the decline down. It is still very difficult because it has to be given through IV. And there are a lot of tests that need to be given prior to the administration and as you are getting the medication. So it is still out of the hands of folks who are have very few resources or are living in rural communities with little access to care. But it's promising, and we're really grateful for that. And I will say, out of all the hundreds of emails I got, there were people who are actively working on Lewy body dementia as well and treatments, and there are clinical trials. So there's hope on the horizon, but we have a long way to go.
Can I say something? I meant to say this before I forgot when you said all the comments. Well, Marjorie knows when I barely knew her and she was a columnist of the Herald, she would never read the comments on her stories. I would read the comments on her stories before I read her story because I always got off on that.
It was too masochistic.
Oh, that's so mean.
But I have to say, I was with some trepidation after I read your incredibly powerful, beautiful piece. And everybody out there who hasn't read it, Google it, Catherine Gergen Barnett and Globe, and it'll come up. I was, as I say, with great trepidation, read the comments. I've never read a piece in the Globe in all the years I've lived here that they've been doing comments where people were universally positive about what you wrote and about your father and how much he meant to them. It was really
I really
incredible.
want to thank people for their kindness and ask that they use that going forward. I agree. It was incredibly heartwarming, and it was such a, it's so refreshing in the world of media right now.
Oh my God! I remember when I went to work for the Globe for their Catholic website. I figured I was doing the Catholic website. I figured things would improve. Everybody wouldn't be saying all these horrible things.
Yeah.
Every second one, I was going to hell. I should be drawn and quartered. I should be crucified. I thought, this is the Catholic website. So you're
really
unusual
grateful.
in that, Doctor. You don't always get that kind
of... People responded unusually, so thank you.
Well, we're thinking of you and your father,
thank
your
you.
mother, and your family, and everybody
really appreciate
there.
it.
So, and
thank you.
that contribution is huge. I'm really glad.
Thank you.
So we mentioned you earlier this morning, Dr. Catherine Gergen Barnett. We were talking about the fires out in L.A., and there's a piece that we read in preparation for talking to you today about the mental health of young kids revolving climate change. And I noted that this young girl, this 14-year-old girl that was quoted in here, was talking about how afraid she was before, living in Los Angeles before the fires.
Yeah.
So tell us what's going on.
Well, I don't think I have to tell any of the listeners what's going on in terms of, climate change and the disaster that's unfolding. And our hearts really go out to people in LA right now and hope there's a swift recovery. But it's, I think what part of what, the article highlighted and what we know is, across, uniformly we have anxiety and depression rates that have gone up. But what's happening with the climate change crisis is so pervasive in terms of social media that people are reading, and it's affecting people's daily lives. Like, that young woman who was quoted, it didn't take a big fire. There had already been disasters in LA. There's already been a huge number of fires on the West Coast. So this is just the big set of fires. And part of what we need to understand is that climate change is obviously impacting all of our mental health because we do feel helpless and hopeless. But there are some pieces the American Academy of Pediatrics has come out in terms of thinking about how clinicians can support teens and family medicine doctors can support teens by asking about it. And, some people are saying, do you screen for these kinds of things? But also really giving ways that people can contribute to make a difference in their communities. So part of, the antidote for a sense of helplessness is to do something, right? And obviously it's not going to change everything, but even small things of getting involved can make a difference in feeling depressed or anxious.
Is it, I hope I got this right,
Yeah.
and please correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, that it is so widespread, the fear of reaction to climate conditions in young people, that this is the Kaiser Family Fund Health
Yeah.
News, is that where it was?
Yes, correct.
Didn't it say in there that there's some recommendations that pediatricians screen not just for mental health in general,
correct.
but mental health around
Specific
climate
around climate change.
That is
unbelievable.
unbelievable.
I read that and I thought, man, I'm not sure we can do one more screening.
Exactly right.
But I'm definitely going to do a follow-up question when somebody is feeling anxious.
Well,
or
they
depressed.
have this statistic in there too from a Harris poll of 2022 that said 89% of teenagers regularly think about the environment, more worried than hopeful. Wow.
Yeah, so, we know that, going back to my father's advice, like get involved, right? And be of service. And obviously some people are too young to do it, but think about the ways that you can be impacting legislators or actually out there passing out N95s for people when the air quality index is poor. I mean, there's a million little things, but we also need to recognize that, as the grown-ups in the rooms, that this is part of our job is to take care of our next generation.
Who's going to take care of Marjorie when it comes to climate change?
We all will.
I'm trying not to get too hysterical, but I can't help it.
Dr. Kathy Gergerman, let's stay with the fire thing for a
Yes.
second. I remember when, was it the fires in Canada where the
Yes.
smoke was coming down?
And
here?
we felt it here.
You really felt it. I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't like I couldn't breathe, but you did
Yeah.
feel
In
some
New York City.
labor
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
What does smoke do to
yeah.
your breathing apparatus when you're in the middle of this horror show?
Yeah. So, scientists can put out or have put out, similar to kind of looking at barometric pressure or temperature, there's something called an AQI, which is air quality index. So I'd really recommend that people are kind of keeping track of that. So anything below 50 we think of as great. You can go out, you can play, you don't need to worry about it. You're going to start to feel the effects, 50 to 100. You might feel some tickling in your throat, maybe some of what we had here. As it gets higher, first of all, we obviously think about with people with COPD and asthma and young folks and frail people, all of that particulate, so all of those little pieces that are coming up into the atmosphere actually affect our lungs and our breathing capacity. But even more when it comes from a fire, because you're thinking about that is burning down homes and buildings, right? Because you're thinking about all those couches that are being lit on fire. All of those synthetic materials are creating a different set of particulate that we actually don't know the long-term consequence, but we do know there are some evidence that people who are in fire-prone zones have higher degree of dementia, sort of in retrospective studies. We also know links to cancer. So these are no small deals. So thinking about, making sure you're indoors, making sure that all your windows are closed, making sure that if you're in a car, you're putting it on recirculated air, that you're not getting air from the outside, thinking about the N95s.
Same mask we were supposed to wear during COVID,
Same wear
right?
that many of us wore during COVID,
Yeah.
exactly, which actually protect you from those little tiny particulates that can hurt your lungs.
Well, I was thinking, reading this story, how often in fires, when you talk about how people died, it wasn't from the flames, it was from the smoke.
Yeah.
Inhaling the smoke.
Absolutely.
So apparently there's...
With the nitrous oxide, yeah, it actually blocks your ability, your red blood cells' ability to take in the oxygen.
By the way, can I just say
really upbeat.
We're being upbeat.
On an unrelated but positive note,
Yes.
CNN is reporting a judge, I'm not sure what level, is cleared the way to release the special counsel report, Jack Smith's report on the election. So we'll give you more on that in the next few minutes.
I wish they'd stop talking about clearing the way, or we're going to... Could they just do it, please? Can they just do it? We're not going to learn that much new anyway. I think we know a lot.
We like the little breadcrumbs
We like the
along the
breadcrumbs.
way.
I love those
It's helpful
breadcrumbs.
for the news.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just get
Did
it
your
out
father
there.
have a favorite president he worked for? I don't think I ever asked him that. Did he have a favorite president?
That's a really good question.
Do you know and
as
you're not
you
telling
know, my father would never have answered that question.
That's right.
Well, I'm not talking to your father. I'm talking to his kid.
I do know that he learned a tremendous amount under each leader, and
that's the kind of answer
yeah.
I'd expect from him, too.
Yeah. Got to keep it in the family.
Yeah.
Okay.
What advice, if we can return to that for a second.
Sure.
I'm sure you deal with caregivers all the time. And
Yes.
obviously we have to worry about them as much as I think we should worry about those to whom they're giving care. What kind of, your father gave advice that you transmitted in your beautiful piece. What kind of advice do you give to caregivers who are struggling? I mean, it's a lot, it's immense.
It is immense. And I think that, first of all, every day is different. One of my friends equated it to labor. Like, you never know when a contraction is going to come. So rest when you have, in between contractions, see what you can do to really rest and take care of yourself. Second of all, just speak out, get the kind of support you need. Not everybody can afford, 24/7 kind of support. So really leaning on the community. And, we know that there's great evidence that folks who are primary caregivers get sick a lot faster. So taking care of yourself and making sure that you're seeing your primary care doctor and you're getting the mental health counseling you need.
Do you feel bad for yourself at all? I mean, you don't seem to be the type, but you are human. Do you know what I mean? The burden, I mean, it is...
No, I actually, to be totally honest, I truly feel like it's an honor to be able to be with somebody towards the end of their life and know it's coming. And I feel very blessed that I have a relationship with my father and with my mother where I treasure that time. And also, I'm Jewish, but I'm also Buddhist. I believe in, getting to be comfortable with our mortality. I think that's a really powerful thing.
Well, let me tell you, he's lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have him.
Thank
It's
you.
pretty obvious as someone who knows both of you wonderful souls and
Thank
your
you.
mother.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
The piece we've been talking about in the Globe, my father, David Gergen, has dementia. Here are his reflections on the path forward for our country, written by our guest, his daughter, Dr. Catherine Gergen Barnett. It's a great piece. You should check it out and get a lot of solace and a lot of great information about what David Gergen thinks, too, about giving us some advice. Thank you very much,
Thank
Doctor.
you so much.
Dr. Catherine Gergen Barnett is Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation in the Department of Family Medicine at Boston Medical Center and Associate Professor at the Boston University Chobanian. Oh, my goodness.
Chobanian.
Thank you.
That's why I'm here.
Got the second word, Jim?
Avedisian.
Thank you very much. School of Medicine.
That's why we have two of us, by the way. If you never figured out why there are two hosts.
I apologize. I should have read that beforehand, and I did not. She's also an associate at Harvard Center for Primary Care and a health innovator fellow at the Aspen Institute. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Doctor.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Okay, after a quick break, we're going to read some of your New Year's resolution texts. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Trusted, local, News.
Homeless shelters are expanding services across Boston and across the state.
Pine Street Inn seeing more than 600 people per night.
Here for what matters to you.
In this weather, some people who generally might not come in are coming in. Cots, mats, and even chairs. We even run out of those lately.
GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the University of Massachusetts Amherst Mount Ida campus in Newton, connecting students and employers in Greater Boston and offering on-campus graduate and pre-college programs. Learn more at umass.edu/Mount Ida campus. And Mass Health Connector, dedicated to expanding health insurance access to uninsured and low-income residents with Connector Care. More at mahealthconnector.org or 1-877-MA-ENROLL.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Margery Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow with the Attorney General. The text segment inspiration comes, this is actually very exciting to us, directly from a former intern on this show, Fernando Cervantes Jr. He now writes for USA Today. He has a dispatch from Quitter's Day, the annual holiday where the majority of us mere mortals quit our New Year's resolution. Quitter's Day was last Friday the 10th, so we figured we'd ask listeners today about their resolutions. Did they last to Friday? Did they give up already? If they're still doing it, why and how? And that's it. And Marjorie has the text. So what are people saying, Marjorie?
An anonymous texter wants to know if your New Year's resolution is to drink more Schweppes, and that is a reference to the massive case of Schweppes you got behind. By the way, do you have a New Year's resolution, Jim?
Well, I was doing like a lot of, eating better, more healthy. And by the way, I stayed on track 100% until someone mailed me a salami of the month. And that actually knocked me totally off kilter.
Paul in Somerville thought your resolution might be to wear a dickie on live stream.
That's coming, by the way. That is coming.
And people are teasing you and they're teasing me.
What a shock.
Zach from Providence is teasing me. My New Year's resolution was to stop buying a new dustbuster every few weeks. But by Friday, I couldn't find the charger and ending up at Target buying another one. That's very funny. I could not find the charger for my dustbuster, and I did buy another one.
No, excuse me. I bought you a charger for Christmas, and you bought a damn dustbuster anyway, so you didn't need the charger. You missed the whole thing there.
That's right.
Okay, fine.
I don't know where the charger you bought me
That's
is.
shocking.
Alrighty.
That really is shocking.
Here's an anonymous texter. I was going to attempt dry or damp January, but since I'm having a glass of wine right now, ... That's a good one. Here's everything was fine until Pottery Barn offered a 70% off sale. There goes my no spend January. And here's another one from Jamal from Newton by way of Roxbury. This is the first year I've made a New Year's resolution. And am I glad to report I have not quit yet? Yes, mainly because I haven't started yet. Does that count?
By the way, can I tell you, I even though I don't have great expertise at keeping resolutions, you know what the key, in my opinion, is? Think small. I mean, you really think small so you can actually achieve something. And then when you achieve it, it gives you positive reinforcement, whatever.
Well, here's kind of a small one, or not exactly what I would think would be a resolution, but this is from Kristen, who says, I have so far stuck to my resolution. I'm even overachieving. But to be fair, my resolution is to expand our horizons by trying a new restaurant each month.
Okay, listen to this, by the way. This is Zoe, who is young but acts like she's 80. I was flirting with dry January until 3 p.m. hit last week, and I drove straight to the revolving sushi bar to have a Sapporo and dinner by myself at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Living the best life, she said. There you are. Which sort of wraps it up. Do you have any? You forget to do resolutions, right?
I did not do a resolution.
No, what a
I'm
shock.
not big on resolutions. Here's Suze from Cranston. I'm just getting started with my resolution. I just got approved to take weight loss drug, Zepbound. I've never heard of it. But I'm obese and I do everything I can, swim, walk, eat healthy mostly. I'm ready to do the work, and with the new drug, apparently, finally, says Suze, I have some hope.
By the way, our resolution of the show we've honored, which is we decided no more tickets, no more RSVPs needed, and we've honored that already through the 13th of the month. That's it.
That's right. Okay, coming up after the 1 o'clock news, Princeton Professor Khalil Gibran Mohammed.
You can access thousands of hours of PBS programs online with GBH Passport. If you're already a member, just register online today or become a member and sign up instantly at gbh.org/passport.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Brown University pre-college programs, where academically motivated high school students can experience college life, nurture their diverse interests, and make new friends. Applications for summer 2025 open January 15th. precollege.brown.edu. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The outgoing Biden administration and incoming Trump administration are working together toward a breakthrough in the war between Israel and Hamas. Biden's National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters today a deal can get done this week. NPR's Daniel Lestrin reports on what an agreement might look like.
Hamas would release around 33 Israeli hostages. A Palestinian official tells NPR this morning that Israel is discussing the release of more than 1,000 Palestinian detainees, including 22 people serving life sentences in connection with deadly attacks on Israelis, and those prisoners would be presumably exiled to Turkey, Qatar, or Egypt. And during all of this, there would be a 6-week pause in fighting. There would be a surge of aid to Gaza, and more talks about the other hostages and trying to end the war.
NPR's Daniel Lestrin. U.S. Senate confirmation hearings for President-elect Trump's cabinet start this week. NPR's Luke Garrett reports Trump's nominees to lead the Departments of Defense, State, Justice, as well as the CIA are among the first to face.
Once the committees advance the nominees, the full Senate will then vote on each candidate, who need a simple majority for confirmation. Luke Garrett, NPR News, Washington.
Florida District Judge Eileen Cannon has paved the way for the Justice Department to release a first part of a special counsel's inquiry into Trump covering the investigation and charges tied to the 2020 vote. Cannon denied a motion by Trump's former co-defendants who sought to block the release of special counsel Jack Smith's report on the election interference case. At least 24 deaths are now linked to the wildfires burning in the Los Angeles area. Among the victims were members of the Mitchell family in Altadena. Here's Elise Hu.
Both family members who died in the Eaton fire faced disabilities. Anthony Mitchell Sr. was a 67-year-old amputee. His son, Justin Mitchell, who also died in the fire, had cerebral palsy. The family says the pair were waiting to be evacuated as flames reached their neighborhood. Hajim White is Anthony Mitchell's daughter.
I just lost it. I started screaming.
Played here in Foxborough, and then he leaned into the mic.
You guys are going to ask me questions about culture, which I'll be happy to talk about and discuss. One thing I've realized about culture is that you can find out what your culture looks like when your family, your business, or your team is at its low point. It's not when you're winning Super Bowls, or it's not when you're 7-1 or 10-1, because then everybody's waving towels and everybody's happy and they're excited to come to work.
Vrabel says the culture going forward will be built on winning and having a competitive spirit. He says he's excited to get to work. Robert Kraft also presented Mike Vrabel's wife, Jen, with a massive bouquet of flowers. Credit the U.S. Department of Transportation for giving Massachusetts a $14.4 million grant to expand charging stations for electric vehicles. The money comes amid uncertainty about the future of the industry and federal incentives aimed at convincing more drivers to go electric. The grant will be used to install 472 new EV charging ports in so-called disadvantaged communities near multifamily housing units. 40 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for use in restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Yeek, and welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from our studio in Brighton, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow we'll be back at the Boston Public Library. The Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell, will be with us from 1 to 2, taking our questions and yours. Hello again, Jim.
Marjorie, I know you hate quizzes. Before I introduce the next guest, I'm going to give a quiz that you will never get right.
Oh, thank you.
I mentioned before from CNN that a judge had decided that Jack Smith's report on his investigations, the January 6th thing, could be released. Here's your quiz. Guess who the judge was who allowed the report to be released? You will never guess it.
It wasn't Eileen Cannon.
Eileen Cannon.
Oh, my God.
She
what
reversed
happened?
her own order.
What happened?
And said the January 6th. Cannon, for those who haven't been paying attention, is the Florida federal judge who was nominated by Trump and has been totally in the tank to the president, and originally said the report could not be released, and she has now refused to extend her earlier order, and it will be released as early as Tuesday. Joined now on Zoom by Khalil Gibran Muhammad. He's a professor of African American Studies and Public Affairs at Princeton? At Princeton? Is this the... whatever. And a visiting professor at Harvard. Great to see you. Congratulations on the new thing.
Thanks, Jim. And it's always a delight to be here, no matter where I am. These issues matter everywhere.
So why'd you go to Princeton?
Say that again, Marjorie?
Why'd you go to Princeton?
Well, I wanted to join a community of folks who are closer to my subject matter expertise in the African American Studies program. Never been a strong suit of the Harvard Kennedy School, although there are good people who work there. And I want to be closer to home, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. A lot of support in your area down there, because I don't recall you did get a lot of support when you were taken to task by Virginia Fox and some of these Congress people from Harvard. I think we talked about that.
Yeah. No, it's certainly true that Harvard, as the wealthiest and oldest university in this nation, has an outsized role in defending academic freedom in all of its many aspects, including the work of people like me who focus on structural and institutional racism. And Harvard is not stating publicly that this is an area that it is committed to in the face of political attacks and intrusions on academic freedom.
Well, that's because they're neutral. Okay, so we're talking to Khalil Gibran.
That's their new goal,
Muhammad.
to be neutral.
So we want to talk about DEI, university presidents running away from DEI in a minute, because we've mostly talked about in the corporate setting. But I want to start with the corporate setting. Do you have an analysis of why the Zuckerbergs of the world and the Walmarts and the whatever are running away from DEI as fast as they can, while Costco has decided to embrace it full throttle? What explains that difference of path, Khalil Gibran Muhammad?
Well, I think that two things are true. One is that companies are beholden to their bottom lines and to their shareholders, particularly publicly traded ones. And as the wind blows, these companies will certainly be pushed in one direction or another. Just as easily as a lot of the DEI commitments that are now being dismantled came online in the last few years. Some had longer commitments, to be sure, but most recently in 2020, we saw a lot of companies redouble their commitment to DEI. So too now, with business imperatives looking in the opposite direction and political pressure as such, and most certainly some significant portion of their consumer base expressing dismay over transgender Bud Light drinkers, they have shifted ground. So that's number one. To explain Costco, I would just simply say that in every market, there are two sides of the coin. And Costco is doubling down that it will capture market share for people whose values are committed to equity. And I think that they're right to do so, both as a matter of principle and justice, but also as a matter of a business imperative.
Well, Mark Zuckerberg was committed to equity once. I don't know if you can remember that far back. But if there's ever anybody that's done a 180 on virtually everything from hate speech to DEI to fact checking we should actually play a little sound for it. Here's Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan's podcast last week addressing fact-checking, or the absence of it, on Meta, comparing it to the danger of censorship written in George Orwell's 1984. Here's Zuckerberg.
I was really worried from the beginning about basically becoming this sort of decider of what is true in the world. So we tried to put in place a system that would deal with it. Because some of the people whose job is to do fact-checking, a lot of their industry is focused on political fact-checking, so they just kind of veered in that direction. I think people just felt like the fact-checkers were too biased. I don't know, it's something out of 1984, one of these books where it's just like, it really is a slippery slope. And it just got to a point where it's just, okay, this is destroying so much trust, especially in the United States, to have this program.
I have no idea what he's talking about. Is this just, I know we're overusing this expression, so apologies to listeners. Is this just another example of anticipatory obedience on the part of a guy who's worried about government contracts and that sort of thing?
Short answer is yes, absolutely. Look, the Trump administration has not only signaled with bullhorns in every way possible that it is coming for everything that it deems either politically hostile to its agenda, which according to Project 2025 just about represents anything that involves addressing America's tremendous levels of inequality, except for economically. And even that's questionable given Trump's record on actually dealing with economic inequality. So I think that what Mark Zuckerberg represents here is like McDonald's, like Lowe's, like Tractor Supply, like any number of Fortune 500 companies, a way to essentially say, we don't want to be targeted by the Trump administration with lawsuits and litigation, or the MAGA community. And so we're on board. Please don't call us out. And that is certainly true for some institutions in higher education at this time as well.
There was a story in the Washington Post about Zuckerberg, and it talked about how Meta is reserving course, even making clear that it's okay to characterize members of the LGBTQ plus community as mentally ill or weird, given political and religious discourse about transgenderism and homosexuality. And I thought that was so bizarre, especially given that just over the weekend, Pope Francis of the Catholic Church, of course, not exactly a bastion.
Of the Catholic Church, as opposed to the other Pope Francis.
Yeah. I mean, you don't really think of LGBTQ rights and Catholicism right next to each other, but the Pope, who's like 88 or whatever he is, said in Italy, at least, you could have gay priests as long as they were living celibate lives. My jaw just about fell on the floor when that happened. But, I mean, LGBTQ is mentally ill or weird. They're really going off the deep end, it seems to me.
Well, let me just say something about the fact checking, because I listened to and read several news reports on this. And one thing that's fascinating is if you take what Zuckerberg said literally, that fact checking has become politically biased, it is the same argument against universities. And what the trope of political bias really says is that there is a retrograde movement in this country to allow for expressions and behavior that we call xenophobic, homophobic, misogynistic, racist. We got a very long list here. The only thing you can't say, apparently in many places, is anything that could be perceived by Israel as anti-Semitic. But everything else in the tradition of American freedom, you ought to be able to say and to call people as it is. So if I am teaching a class and describing America's past in terms that actually describe white supremacy or systemic racism, essentially in many public colleges, universities, and certainly in K through 12, that is political bias. It is no longer a fact that white supremacy was a real thing that can be fact-checked, but in fact is a form of political bias. So we are in an upside down world. Literally, there is no logic or sense that makes clear what it is that we're dealing with, other than expressions of MAGAism and Trump's political reach in this country at this time.
So how do you see this as an academic? We hear a lot about backlash. Okay, Obama got elected, first black president, then we had Trump, or, going back to, the Civil War and Jim Crow and Reconstruction and all that. What is this about?
Well, the most the most salient explanation for this is that since we have learned that America's white population will no longer be the majority within about a generation, there has been a political movement to hold on to power for white Americans as much as possible. That explains not just the backlash to Obama's presidency, it explains the reversal of Roe v. Wade, which frankly, the evangelicals have been at it for 40 years since it was passed, but a larger community of politicians within the Republican Party, people who are formerly moderate, attacking reproductive rights and claiming it on the grounds of a kind of neo-eugenics movement that we need more white babies in this country, helps to explain all of it. And we could fill in all the gaps in between, including immigration policy, which of course, economically, every single economist will tell us is required. We have countries all over the world that are aging and in desperate need of immigrant populations, which tend to be younger. And here in the United States, we are saying that immigrants are an evil and plague on this country.
We're talking to Khalil Gibran Muhammad from Princeton.
Well, so if that's what this is about, then white people becoming a minority, we could anticipate this for the next, whatever it is, 10 years before we get there or something, or maybe continuing for another 10 years after we're dealing with getting there. I mean, that's a big deal.
Well, I don't see that we come out of this in a way that puts this genie back in the bottle, because you're right, the demographics are going to change. That's a fact. That's inevitable. I think what we can anticipate is that enough people who will essentially say that the rising global South and people of color in the world are not hell-bent on eliminating white people as a function of reversing 500 years of colonial history and enslavement of those people, will essentially provide a kind of society that is representative of the very things that we've not mostly had in this world. Listen, most of the world over the past 200 to 400 years has been a world steeped in racial and religious hierarchies for the purposes of creating winners and losers, not in some gesture of equality, but in fact, as an advance of civilization. This was the argument that Europeans largely made. We will oppress you in the name of civilization and you will benefit from it. That's unraveling, and it is coming apart at the seams. And if we look at the international human rights discussion, particularly about what's been happening in Gaza, we can see how powerfully the fictions of Western dominance are unraveling in front of us. So there is hope on the other side of Trumpism, but these people will never go away. The power that they are attempting to monopolize, they're going to pursue forever. That's not going to change. What needs to change is people on the other side of that equation will have to step up and defend a world that will save us from climate change and all sorts of calamity and disasters that are unfolding right before our eyes.
Well, I would argue, as someone who's not in the university community, if there's ever a place where that discussion or rescue should happen is on university campuses, but they're at risk as well. So I started by saying, explain to me a tale of two corporations, Costco and a ton of these other Fortune 500s. Let's do that with universities too. On one hand, we talked to you about this guy before. There was this guy, Michael Roth from Wesleyan, who before the election was trashing Harvard for kowtowing to Trump with this neutrality thing. And then we read in the Crimson, which I have to say does extraordinarily good reporting.
They do.
Obviously, a Harvard student newspaper. The title of which, from last day or two, Garber, as in Alan Neutral Garber, privately tells faculty that Harvard must rethink messaging after GOP victory. Okay, Michael Roth having the courage to confront someone who is attempting to crack down on academic freedom and free speech on college campuses. And on the other end, we have Alan Garber telling his faculty in a private meeting that we have to rethink what we say and how we say it because there's a new sheriff in a town. It seems to me there are far more Garbers in the university community than there are Roths. Is that right? And if it is, why?
Well, if we were using silence as the measure of evidence, then absolutely, no question, period. So we don't know for sure how many people feel that this is a moment for backtracking. And Garber himself may have divided agendas here, one that is in his heart and one that is being articulated to the Harvard Crimson. But make no mistake about it, every university, and I keep emphasizing this, does not have the same responsibility as Harvard or even as Princeton and many other elite universities. We have already seen that at the public college level, at public college and university, in about a dozen states, DEI offices being completely shuttered, including Women's Center. The University of Idaho and a local news station recently reported that a 52-year-old Women's Center has been shuttered under a recent resolution passed by state legislators in Idaho, which affects 4 public universities, because any form of focusing on identity is by definition discriminatory to other people, which is the twisted argument and logic here, which again, the entire world was built on various notions of identity, which happen to favor Europeans and whites in America. So Garber is essentially conceding to the Republican Party that Harvard will get its house in order on the very terms that they have laid out, which are terms that are steeped in falsehoods and misinformation. And yes, he is now the anti-Roth, as we could say, because he's publicly now saying what the agenda is for Harvard University.
When we were talking about corporations a minute ago, Khalil, you were talking about, use the term bottom line. So I will play Alan Garber in this conversation. We've invited him on, by the way. We haven't heard back. I have, I think it's $600 million in federal grants. I have the largest endowment of any university in the world, I think. And while the tax, I may get the numbers slightly wrong, on university endowment profits are, increases every year is now 1.4%. Vice President Vance wants to make it 35%. So I am protecting the bottom line of Harvard so we have the resources necessary to do the wonderful things we do for these young people here. What do you say to Garber?
Well, you won't be able to solve some of the world's most difficult problems. One, you will cut off the supply line of talent and ideas, the diversity of thought that exists in the world, that will ultimately provide a perspective to help solve very difficult problems. So you will lose, period. And unlike a company that is responsible to shareholders, Harvard University is not responsible to shareholders. It does not have to present to Bill Ackman and Sam Lessin what it did with its money last quarter. It has an endowment precisely because it protects it from the vagaries of political agendas and political attacks. So it is behaving like a corporation when it is anything but in terms of its actual funding source and what it does, what it is in the business of doing.
Okay, so let's do a little Nostradamus thing here. I am totally with you, assuming I got this right, that silence is, you didn't use the word, I'll use it. Silence is guilt, at least from my perspective in the university community. So assuming that that is true, let's fast forward to 2027, for example. What's the state of the university community halfway into the Trump administration?
Okay, well, we already see the handwriting on the wall. So if we're talking about private institutions, aside from the public ones, we will see a diminishment of particularly Black and brown students. That is happening. Either places have held the line in 1 year since the Supreme Court decision, or others have seen significant drop-offs. So one can anticipate that that will change. So campuses, elite campuses in particular, private ones, will become whiter as a matter of fact. They will also become places where we will see a resurgence of the kind of discriminatory behavior on college campuses that long made places hostile. Let's just deal with white women, for example. Harvard University was not a place where a white woman could get a fair and equal education for most of its history. Radcliffe was a solution to that problem. Radcliffe, only in the last 25 years or so, actually, I don't remember when Radcliffe dismantled, but I think in the last 25 years, it stopped teaching women students and became the basis for a fellowship program. That's the kind of recent history we're talking about. It is absolutely absurd to think that somehow a focus on previously excluded populations since Donald Trump's election has proven this massive lie that all these terrible things were happening. And now we need to go back to what? Go back to traditions where half the world's population was not even welcome on a college campus by and large. It's crazy. But yes, that's what we will see. A diminishment of women, a diminishment of people of color, a diminishment of various effective programs, including curricular offerings. Harvard saw the disappearance of about 5 faculty members teaching in various arts and sciences programs last year, who we don't know why they all went away, but they went away. A Columbia University professor was recently forced to retire over her support for pro-Palestinian demonstrations, as reported in the New York Times over the weekend, to say nothing of many others who have been pushed out of jobs in higher education. So you'll see fewer course offerings that reflect the world we live in, fewer people who represent communities that were formerly excluded from those campuses, and an environment, if Christopher Rufo has his way based on what's happening at New College, that will simply turn the world upside down, and conservatives will have a monopoly in a way that actually traffics in misinformation in ways that liberals, whether or not they all agree, often are much more embracing of those differences in an open and transparent way.
Yeah, that New College is the one in Florida, right?
Yeah,
That Ron
yeah.
DeSantis kind of turned on its head.
Yeah.
Used to be. So you're a black guy. You have a lot of colleagues, people of color, students of color. This is going to be a very horrible time. I mean, to be in school, it would seem to me.
No, it's a terrible time for inspiring young people that all of this is going to work out and be okay. That's the tough part.
Yeah.
Because, you know, someone like me still has to face an 18-year-old who's at the beginning of their life. And particularly if they happen to be an 18-year-old who is non-gender conforming or a first generation college student of color, and explain to them that they belong in this environment, in an institution that basically said for most of their history, we weren't built for you. You weren't welcome here. And now all of a sudden we're supposed to say, but you really are welcome here. No, don't ignore. I mean, please ignore what's happening politically. Please ignore the silence from the executives who run this institution. Please ignore the centers that have just closed. None of that really means anything, because you're going to be okay. That's going to be a harder and harder sell. And emotionally, it's going to be very difficult. And there's no training for this, for at least for a generation that I'm aware of.
And obviously, you also think if something bad happens, you're victimized either because you're black or you're a woman, or you know, you don't. It was hard enough to go forward with those kinds of things before. It seems to me this just kind of makes there's a certain open season thing that I keep thinking of. Do you get the support if you are a person?
If you exist.
Yeah, if you're a person of color or you're a woman and there's something untoward or even criminal. You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. And again, we're back here on a college campus, but every workplace in this country is going to face similar dynamics. Look, the world is profoundly unequal, and it's taken a lot of work to try to right that ship. And some of that work was just legislative. It wasn't in practice. It was just on paper. And so here we are facing the reality that a lot of people, you know, let's just end this conversation on the absurdity of the California wildfire. You know, here we have hundreds, thousands of people affected by this. We've got 24 people who've lost their lives. We've got entire census tracts, zip codes that have gone up in flames. And Elon Musk takes to Twitter to blame the fire department's promotion of a DEI as part of its commitment to overturning one of the public agencies that it is well documented has been one of the most racist, sexist public agencies across the country, not just in California or any particular municipality. That actually currently Kristen Crowley is the first woman and openly gay person to be fire chief. And now, like the Baltimore Bridge collapse or the Secret Service failures, DEI is being blamed for the California wildfires. I mean, we don't have to accept any of this. And it's a shame that we actually have to report on this nonsense. But it is the reality that people will face. And it is the reality that essentially any white person, particularly white man, let me say it differently, any white man in this country is presumptively qualified to do whatever they're going to do. And whatever their failures happen to be, like Donald Trump's, it's either political bias or it wasn't their fault. I mean, it's just, that's where we are right now.
On that note, we're glad you're still with us there,
Mike,
Khalil Gibran Muhammad.
You know, really quickly, what do you tell the 18-year-old?
I tell them the truth. We start with the truth. This is what is happening. And this is why it's happening. And the only way forward is to face those facts squarely and to build communities of resistance to change those facts.
Thank you
Good to see
very
you.
much, Khalil Gibran
Talk to you
Muhammad.
soon. Be
Appreciate
well.
it.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Khalil Gibran Muhammad is a professor of African American Studies and Public Affairs at Princeton and a visiting professor at Harvard. Okay, let's get back to something that matters here, Jim.
Well, you're into it too. I know you're going to blame me for this. Go ahead.
The transitions are sometimes a little bit difficult, but we are, and Jim insisted upon this, we're open the lines to ask you about the miraculous return of the buffet. Apparently the buffet, norovirus be damned, is roaring back big time, and we're going to go from what's wrong with the world to that's right with a buffet. Up next, you're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu is trying again to get her contentious property tax plan approved. Patriots fans got reintroduced to a familiar face. We'll have more on the first appearance from former linebacker and new head coach Mike Vrabel. Plus, the Boston Magic Lab is the place for cutting-edge magicians to experiment, and this week they're putting on their biggest show of the year. That's all starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have any unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And MIT Sloan Executive Education, helping professionals empower their careers and explore over 90 courses blending cutting-edge research with real-world application. More at executive.mit.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browdy. We're live from GBH Studio 3, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow, John King from CNN, Trenny Casey, and 1 to 2, Ask the Attorney General with Andrea Campbell at the library. Amid all the chaos in the world, we wanted to send you into your afternoon with some good news. That's right. The buffet is back. At least according to Kara Baskin and the Globe, who extolled the virtues of the buffet with some post-COVID improvements. You get variety, you get bang for your buck, you get the freedom to be gluttonous, and if you play your cards right at the buffet table, you might even make some new, like-minded, carb-loving friends. That was the least compelling to me. We're going to ignore the rising cases of norovirus. Not once have I ever gotten sick from appropriating food from the Whole Foods hot bar, which is a whole different story. 877-301-8970. You and the buffet. Are you buffeting it again? Or is the idea of multiple trays of unlimited food just about as unappetizing as a stomach bug? And if you're into it, as am I, where's the best place to load up multiple plates of food and shove it down your gullet at 877-301-8970. Now, in her piece, Kara had 7 reasons why we love buffets. One is variety. Obviously, that's
big
huge.
deal, yep.
No judgment is number 2. Excess is the goal. A clean slate. This is huge. She went to Henrietta's table at the Charles Hotel in Cambridge, and they say as soon as you stand up, each time you stood up, you're handed a fresh, clean plate.
That's a big deal.
Friendship potential, which is totally ridiculous.
Well,
that you make friends.
Not for Kara. She made friends.
Well,
you might not.
Interactivity, meaning with the Eggs Benedict guy, she says, also totally ridiculous. Anthropological intrigue. Buffets are also a fascinating opportunity to glimpse the gastronomic mores of fellow diners. That I love.
Yes.
Egalitarian pleasure, meaning Harvard professors, a man in a plaid tuxedo, hungry kids, etc. Everybody's doing the same sort of thing. I have to say, one of the most thrilling things that I can imagine is not even the buffet, but on your way to the buffet. And you're just thinking, anybody who goes to the buffet that does not have a strategy, you probably don't even realize this. This is my area of expertise. You know what's always first at the buffet? Rolls. You know why? because they cost nothing,
That's
and they
right.
want you to fill
That's
up
my favorite part
on bread
of the buffet.
before you get
Especially if they have cinnamon rolls.
to the fillet, to the prime rib, to the lobster or whatever it is, depending on where you're going. The variety and the fact is, she says it was $79 to go to this thing, but she did 4 full plates, which was only $20 a plate. She felt fabulous, and I feel fabulous about her for doing so.
They had a lot of fancy seafood at this.
They did?
Smoked mussels, oysters, foie gras. I always have difficulty saying that.
Yeah, you said it beautifully.
Yeah, and they had eggs Benedict, of course, smoked salmon, and a delicious chocolate bread pudding. And
You left out the most important thing, your
tons of
favorite food in the
bacon, tons of
world.
bacon.
Roasted vegetables.
Well, they did have roasted
Let me tell you,
vegetables.
anybody who eats roasted vegetables at a buffet should be like expelled from the room. We want to know, are you into buffets, or is norovirus making you nervous about buffets? And if you are, do you have a strategy? Obviously, Marjorie has no strategy. You ever go to a buffet?
Oh my God, I've been to tons of buffets. I remember when I was little, a kid, speaking of cinnamon rolls, we used to go to a buffet like maybe a couple of times this summer down the Cape. This place is no longer there, called Rothmore Lodge.
How great was that?
Well, it would drive
Low
my
quality, but
father,
plenty.
No, my father crazy because what I eat, I would eat all the rolls, and that would be that. I'd slather them with butter and eat the rolls. But you do have to have if you're going to be serious about this and scientific about it, you want to eat the expensive food, right? Because you're not going to get that. So you would go, I suppose, if you liked oysters, which I don't, you go for the oysters and the foie gras and the mussels and the shrimp and not
the prime ribs
and the prime rib.
Filet.
God, I'm getting really hungry.
By the way, there was a joke when in the Catskills when I worked there like 100 years ago. This was like, one of those grandfather jokes. The food's horrible, but the portions are huge. And that, so even I think most people go to buffets. If you're lucky enough to go to a really high quality one, that is the goal. But it really is about gluttony. It's about quantity.
Remember where we used to go with our lawyer?
Yeah, when we had an agent, which we had until a bunch of years ago, once a year, he would take us to, it's no longer there, the Bristol Lounge for a Sunday buffet at the Four Seasons, which I think cost triple digits each, I believe.
I don't know.
And I have to say, and we didn't pay, obviously. He was paying for us. Of course, we're paying for him. You ever had an experience like that in your whole life?
No, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's just there's so much food. There's seafood. There's beef. There's roast beef.
Remember what I said the first time we went there with him? We went a couple of times.
You can't. You put aluminum foil in your pockets.
No. I said I wanted to be buried there. That's what I said. 877-301.
Right underneath the bacon.
8970. We want to know how you feel about buffets. And if you are into them, as you can probably tell I am, what is your strategy? If you have one, or do you just plow in? Did I ever tell you, my mother, who, was working 3 jobs, single mother, whatever, who didn't have much money. And what we would do, I don't think I ever told you this, other than going to an occasional musical coming to town, it's run before Broadway. The only other thing she'd save money for is about once every 6 months, we'd go to the buffet at the Bellevue Hotel in downtown Philadelphia.
Was it great?
Oh my God. I remember it like it was yesterday. I would roll right in there and then they'd roll me out. And it was really, and I'm telling you, it was about as much joy as it could possibly be. 877-301-8970. You and the buffet. Do you go as an adult, or you just went as a kid?
I haven't been to a buffet in a while, but I definitely, you gotta you gotta figure out, you're gonna go there and be a normal person, or you're gonna go there and not eat breakfast and not eat lunch and then just go in and stuff yourself to the gills and roll out the door.
Let me tell you, if you've eaten breakfast and lunch, you should stuff yourself to the gills so you can't get off the floor. By the way, we'll get to you guys in a second at 877-301-8970. The most famous, buffet in our region is the Nordic in Charlestown, Rhode Island.
Yes.
And this, by the way, it's $140 for an adult. It's a mere $60 for an 8 to 12-year-old. My favorite thing is it's a maximum dining of 2 hours. But you know who the guy who
maximum dining of 2 hours?
You know who first people told us about it? The Phantom Gourmet. The Andelman brothers told us about this on our old show, and they told us that football teams would roll up in buses, and these like 50 400-pound guys would get off the thing like ready for action. There's a 10% service charge, so it's $154 plus tip. Let me just tell you, lobster, snow crab legs,
Scallop and shrimp scampi, steamed little neck clams.
Black Angus prime rib, Black Angus filet mignon, on
Lobster,
and on
Jim.
and on like this.
Lobster.
I know that. Do you eat lobster?
Well,
You're not
I'm not
crazy
really
about it,
interested
okay.
in it, but forced to. Snow crab legs. I don't know what those would be like in Rhode Island. And then they have things like lobster mac and cheese and lobster fritters. Of course, it's in Rhode Island, so they want to keep the seafood. thing
Anybody
going.
who eats macaroni and cheese when you're at a high quality buffet and you fill up really doesn't deserve to be there. That's my
Okay.
philosophy. Let's take some calls. Alan and Charlton, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hey, Jim and Margie. Thanks for taking the call.
Thanks for
Hey,
calling.
So I used to go to a restaurant called the Stroke and 8 restaurant in Boston.
Yeah.
Up on Sodersfield Road. And, I was totally trying to strategy like you were talking about, Jim,
Yeah.
and I got into the gluttony strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I used to go there and eat normally, but then one time I said, I'm going to get my value, and they had roast beef, lamb, and ham there.
Oof.
And also they had double-baked potatoes,
Oof.
salad bar, dessert bar, bread. I said, no, forget, I love the bread, I love the double-baked potatoes. I'm going to go for the meat. And I had the meat, and it was so delicious. I ate. I got in my car after the dinner. I couldn't drive away. I had to push my seat back, like lay it down, because I was having a hard time breathing. I felt like a snake that, it takes them like 6 months. They eat a rabbit and then takes them like a day. I felt like that.
Alan, there could not have been a better first call to start the buffet discussion here on Boston Public Radio. That was a lovely, lovely call. Thank you so much for that call.
My husband measures the value of a buffet by how many plates of oysters he can squeeze in between plates of prime rib. Wequasit on the Cape is the best.
You've been there?
I've not been to a buffet there, but I've been to Wequasit Inn.
Is that a really
It's-
like a
oh, my
ritzy
goodness,
kind of
it's
club?
absolutely gorgeous.
Where
but
is it?
It's in Harwich, I think.
Harwich, okay.
Or is it Brewster? It's Harwich or Brewster, one or the other. And you can go, but you can walk down there and just go to the bar and look at all the beautiful, and it's on the beach, and it's absolutely gorgeous.
Do we have Julian, our buddy Julian Miguel, pronouncing buffet? Can we hear that, please, if you have it?
Buffet or buffet.
Wait,
Okay.
some people say buffet? It's buffet, is it not?
Buffet or buffet.
Oh, or buffet.
Buffet, okay.
Okay, buffet.
Here's Jay in Chestnut Hill. When I was a teen, we used to bring my grandma to Old County Buffet. It was a fun family activity, though my dad always acknowledged the low quality of the food.
Isn't it old? Is it Old Country or Old
I thought
County?
it was Old Country, but
Are they still in existence? Because I want to say how horrible the food is, but I don't want to hurt their business if they're still around.
I don't know.
Oh my God! It is
Did
literally.
they used to be the Watertown Mall?
Yes, they did. The Watertown Mall where
Yeah.
the RMV was, that
Yeah.
side of the street. And it is literally, you know what it shared the building with? The RMV.
The RMV.
You would have been better having all you can eat at the RMV. It's the Old Country is what it's called. Old Country.
I thought it was Old
buffet.
Country. Did you ever
Yeah,
go to that?
Old Country. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There are some places where they have buffets, but I'm a little suspicious of some of them. You know what I
Really?
mean? Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people have lunch buffets. I've been to a lot of those. Indian restaurants have great lunch buffets.
but like this first guy, Alan, who called.
You're
I mean,
exhausted.
the problem is you really don't know when to end because you stop because you're full, and then you say, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to eat all I can until I sort of expire, I guess.
Here's Larry from Gardner. Love buffets, and the neurovirus does not deter me. My go-to is Golden Corral.
Never heard of that.
Never heard of that either.
Now, the good news is, according to Google AI, one of our colleagues, looks Old Country Buffet is permanently closed. All its locations, including in Mass, have closed and been auctioned off. So I can say the food was like out of a can. I mean, it was literally, it was as if they gave you 12 cans and a can opener, and you do it, and you could heat it on a Bunsen burner, inedible. But if you're going to do a buffet, here's my
There's
position.
a place across the street, we used to see our coworkers.
The Asian
go
one you're
into.
talking about. Asian one?
I don't know what it is.
Okay, but the key to this is I would suggest, I want to give advice because this is an area where I have expertise. Rather than going to a buffet a few times that's affordable, don't go until you save up and go to a more expensive one where the quality of the food is good, and you'll be talking about
Well,
it.
this is what somebody just texted too. You guys, I worked in food service for 15 years. Unless you're playing big money, buffet equals cheap food. So you want to go to some place that might be a little bit.
Anonymous texter says, quote, "I'll eat lobster if I'm forced to." Such a Marjorie sentence. That is so. No one else on the planet would say I'd eat.
Yeah, not everybody likes seafood that well.
By the way, an anonymous texter says, "My family pronounces it buffet," which is really what it is. 877-301-8097.
Jim, I met my person who ended up being my best friend at a buffet.
That is not true.
His name is Jimmy Buffett.
That's actually pretty good.
Okay,
by the way,
Susan
but I know I like Kara as much as you do. Do you know anybody ever has been at a buffet who met someone and started a conversation in the buffet line at the foie gras before they returned? Do you know one person who had that experience?
Well, you might ask somebody ahead of you in line what they thought
Friendship
of such and such.
potential is what she labels it as.
I don't know. Maybe it's a dating thing. Maybe you find people to go out with at the buffet. I don't know.
Susan
in Rockport. What do you think, Susan?
Hi, Susan. Hello.
Hi, guys. So listen, I love you. I'm calling from a town that my grandfather was born and raised in, but he moved to New Jersey where he would treat us to the country club buffets on Sunday nights.
Oh, how great was that?
Which were amazing because it was, I think, very high quality. And, you know, as an 8-year-old, I was like in heaven. But what they would give at cocktail hour were the Petrus Farm goldfish that were not on the market at the time. You could only get them commercially.
Oh.
Which we absolutely love to eat. And then I would stuff myself. And, of course, then you would have to have dessert.
Of course.
Right? And they would make you sundaes. And then, and sadly, on a few occasions, I got home and with a stomach ache, and of course you can imagine what happened a few hours later.
We don't need to hear that, but thank you. That's very...
Yeah, you don't need to hear that.
Yeah, you do feel a lot of pressure to really stuff yourself if you're paying, you know, a buffet and you have the whole smorgasbord in front of you.
Yes, even as a child.
Susan, thank you for the call. Here's Liz, who was priced out of Cambridge. Any discussion of buffets is incomplete without mentioning the glorious Brazilian barbecue buffets. Whether it's little expensive local places like Oasis in Medford or big chains like, I don't know how to say this. Anyway.
Fogo de Chao, is that how you say it? Do you guys, yeah.
Or Texas to Brazil.
Actually, Zoe is looking at how pathetic we are. So it wasn't even close? Is that it wasn't close? Say it in my ear. Can you say it in my ear, Zoe? Oh, hold on. Oh, Fogo de Chao. Oh, we did get. Oh, fine.
Oh, Fogo de Chao. Okay.
Now, Michael Masso texted. He's the guy.
Huntington.
He ran the Huntington. Yeah. He says, he's right, by the way, and I apologize, Michael, but thank you. I want to correct Jim's version of the Catskill joke. The best version is told by, Woody Allen at the start of one of his movies. Can you raise that up? By the way, it's blocked, if you don't mind. 2 old Jewish ladies are talking about the food at a Catskills resort. Thank you. The first lady said, the food... This is really funny. The food here is so terrible. The second lady says, yes, and the portions are so small. But I think that's funny. Michael, thank you. Thank you. And you did.
It's very funny. A lot of people are talking about buffets on cruise ships.
Yeah.
That's where you can have.
Well, I can tell that story too. We have a former coworker who I think is now at Channel 4. Is that right?
I think it was 5.
Well, whatever. He's at 4 or 5. One of the great people we ever worked with. And for a variety of reasons, one of which we can't tell you on the air. He and his wife love cruises.
Yes.
And I hope I got this right. I think I got this right. They would always find bargains on cruises, and they were constantly doing cruising, if that's the proper verb. He went on a 7-day cruise once, and he gained 17 pounds. 17 pounds in 7 days. And that's because every meal is all you can eat. Isn't that the deal? By the way, when I worked at Grossinger's, which was a resort in the Catskills, it wasn't a buffet, but every meal was all you could eat. I had people, there were 8 entrees at every dinner. I had people who ordered all 8 entrees, and I had a balance. It was disgusting. I used to have to balance the plates on top of each other.
They would order all 8 entrees? That is disgusting.
Yeah, and by the way, my experience was generally those who ordered all 8 entrees were the worst tippers, which really aggravated the hell out of you. You know what I mean?
Yes. Now, a texter thinks that all buffets are disgusting and they're germ fests, and this person is sick of seeing gluttony celebrated. Yuck.
The only time they're germ fest, I've occasionally gone to a buffet where I've eaten directly out of the buffet thing because I couldn't wait to get back to the table. That's the only time. It's But I'm telling you, a good buffet, it's like you died and went to heaven, or you just died anyway.
So, yeah. How long were we at the one at the Four Seasons? We were there for like 3 hours.
It was. I am telling you, every single thing was.
It was disgusting.
No, I would never have spent. As great as I would never have spent that money if we hadn't been taken. Would you have ever spent that amount of money?
I
for
think
them?
you would have spent that money.
I
Jim.
would have absolutely. Susie, I was just trying to. Susie in Bellingham, welcome to the show. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Jim. I'm Marjorie. God,
Hi.
you guys are cracking me up. I can't even talk right now.
We're glad you're here. What's up?
The best buffet that I ever went to, and I've eaten at the Rainbow Room, Jim.
Ooh.
So
Wow.
I have, was Griffin Gate in Lexington, Kentucky.
Ooh.
And I'm going back to about 2008. And I mean, they had tables and tables and tables of food. You could go, it took up a whole room. Everything from basic, pancakes, eggs, bacon, all that, but you could have it custom made by the chef. You could get your full Irish or your eggs Benny.
Eggs Benny.
The seafood table, though. The seafood table was amazing. Jim and Marjorie, Marjorie, you don't like oysters,
Lobster.
but they
No.
had the raw bar. They had shrimp cocktail, like the Colossal.
Listen to the
And,
excitement in Susie's voice, by the way. This is
yes,
exactly
yes,
what I
it
was.
was great.
Good. Keep it going,
I mean,
Susie.
king crab legs when they were still the size of your arm, king crab legs. It
Oh,
was,
my
it was
God.
just every kind of meat you could imagine. It was something else.
Susie, that was
Definitely.
spectacular. Thank you. Call us again sometime. Thanks for the call.
Listen to this. We have a
What's it?
philosopher who's emailed, or texted, I should say, eating the rolls and salad at all-you-can-eat buffet instead of going for the most expensive and tasty stuff is like being given a wheelbarrow and 30 minutes in a bank vault and spending that time counting loose change.
That's beautiful. Who said that?
It's a texter.
That
They
is
didn't-
so lovely.
They didn't sign their name.
That is beautiful.
Okay, somebody else says, I'm not one for buffets with one exception. Sushi! I can put down enough to feed a small fishing village.
Well, sushi can be expensive, by the way. And my experience with sushi is you don't fill up that easily. Well, you've never had sushi in your whole life.
I have the
before.
sushi that's not
You've
fish.
never eaten.
Yes, I have.
Oh,
you can
what,
have
like a
the
cucumber?
avocados, cucumbers.
Yeah, well, that costs like $1
rice.
a dozen. Who gives a damn? Now, by the way, we have, what's his face? Julian Miguel saying that Brazilian restaurant to see if we said it. Miguel, is that how you say his name? Do we have him saying his own name or we do not have him say? Let's have him saying his own name first. Do we have it?
Julien Michel.
Julian Michel. Okay, Julian Michel. Can you say the name of that Brazilian restaurant if you don't mind? Julian. Good. Okay, here he is. Maybe he's not.
It's frozen.
It's frozen. Okay.
Let's go to Jocelyn in Fall River.
Hey,
Hi,
Jocelyn. What's up?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Jim, I cannot believe that you have not been to the Golden Corral. Now, myself, I am with you, Marjorie. I'm not a fan of buffets.
Yeah.
I just think they make you eat too much. But my mom, she felt there should have been some exception during the COVID pandemic. She could not believe that she was not allowed to go, that buffets didn't exist. And Golden Corral, we live in Fall River.
Yeah.
As soon as the ban was lifted, she went to her favorite one. Golden Corral is in Springfield.
Oh, my God.
From Fall River. Do the mileage math. Because that was the closest one to. She got introduced to them down south. They're like every other block in the south. When she heard there was a Golden Corral in Massachusetts, I believe New England.
So
She probably would have had me driving to Connecticut. But there is one. It is, from her opinion, it's really one of the good ones. But again, I'm not a fan because I think they make you eat too much. But for those that love them, Golden Corral is kind of the good place, good choice. So
Jocelyn.
I'm impressed.
I love your mother already.
Jocelyn, that was a great call.
Fabulous
From
story.
Fall River to Springfield. That's quite a hike, but she was willing to
I
make
do
the
it.
sacrifice.
I used to drive. I taught you used to drive when I was in college in
That's right,
Philadelphia. Drive to get
Philadelphia
a
to New
hot
York,
dog at
to get a
Nathan's.
hot dog.
43rd and Broadway. Josh from Worcester says, "Does Jim consider the hot bar his personal buffet?" The answer is yes. I do. I do. Now we're always trying to guess what Jared has never been to a buffet
Jared
in
at a
his
buffet.
whole life. And if he did go to a buffet, you know what you'd have? You'd have a little tiny plate, little piece, like one oyster, one little clam casino, and little piece of a beef bourguignon.
Is that what the inside of my head sounds like to you? One little oyster.
Okay, so you're not a buffet kind of guy.
I
right?
love a buffet.
You?
So we always joke about that. I don't eat, but I love food as an event. So of course I love a buffet.
Okay.
In fact, I was just reminded by the last caller. The last great buffet I had was in the South, in Montgomery, Alabama.
No, really?
Really good Southern
A lot of
cooking.
bacon.
A lot of bacon. Just really good food.
Yeah.
I love a
okay.
breakfast buffet.
Oh, those
actually.
are the best.
They do have they have Hot Bar. Whole Foods has a breakfast buffet. Do they still have the bacon? I hope they
First
do.
of all, it's not a buffet. A
a
buffet
hot
is
bar.
all you can eat for a price. You
Okay.
pay by the pound.
You do pay it by the
By
pound.
the
It's
pound.
not quite the same.
Our colleague Azita used to bring in like
Like
pounds,
8 pounds of bacon.
I
Well,
remember
because
that.
it's so light, you could bring in like 100 strips of bacon for like
Is that why she did
$1.50.
it?
That's exactly why she did. That woman knows how to live. Okay, Bacon Fridays. Zoe texts, I loathe Bacon Fridays. She's a resident vegetarian.
Oh,
Well,
from
I'm
when
sorry.
Azita was bringing it in.
Yeah,
and
she
it
did.
sometimes it would be super crispy.
Oh yeah. Well, this I wish we could
Makes me so
discuss this
hungry.
more because it's very exciting. But what are you doing on the show?
So we know the Mark Morris Dance Troupe. We're having Mark Morris of the Mark Morris Dance
Oh,
Troupe
excellent.
on today. He has a new program all built around the songs of Burt Bacharach. So how
Oh,
fun is that? Isaac
oh.
Mizrahi did the costumes and helped with the design. And so that's coming to Boston, so we'll talk to him about that. We'll talk to the artist Kay Walking Stick, who is about to turn 90 years old. She's still painting, and she's done these amazing landscapes that answer some of the 1800s painters looking at the Hudson River School, beautiful paintings of
love
the country.
Hudson River School.
But as a Native American person, she's looking at what land means to her. And then we'll speak with Mary Grant, president of Mass Art.
She's a great guest.
We'll have a number of topics we're talking to her about, including how Jimmy Carter was the arts president.
Did you
I
hear
almost said
who
Jimmy
texted
Stewart.
in to correct me when I told a Catskill joke and he told it the proper way? Michael Masso.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that
Yeah,
great? And
yeah.
he was right and I was wrong and he got it beautifully.
Oh,
We'll be
fantastic.
listening. And by the way, if you haven't figured it out yet,